Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this April 23rd, 2024. Tonight, we return to the realm of near-death experiences. We'll be talking about the positive ones, but we're going to focus in a bit on reports of the negative ones. I have some very disturbing stories to share with you from a medical journal tonight. Of course, you know Jamie's had some, and we have two wonderful guests who deal with this topic to join us tonight, both returning guests, Regan Forston and Kathy McDaniel, to act as a panel of discussion on this topic. Not one to miss. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right with you in just a moment. Everybody, I hope you're all having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever it is for you, and that you're ready to settle in for the next 3 hours to talk about the supernatural, the metaphysical, the esoteric, the spiritual. However you classify it, we've got an interesting show for you this evening. I am, again, your host, Bishop Brian Willett, with co-host Jamie Wolf. How you doing, Jamie?
Hey, everybody. Good evening. I'm a little tired. I've got a barn cat that just had babies. I got one more pregnant who's could have many days, so I'm on kitten watch.
Yes.
So I haven't got a lot of sleep.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then we've had a busy day today.
There's
I'm
that
definitely tired. Jamie and I had to go to a planning and zoning meeting to discuss the use of the new property, and it went exceptionally well. Douglas County was very gracious, and the zoning and planning department were very, very helpful and
definitely
very supportive, I think, of what this church is doing, what this ministry is doing, and they sound like they're going to stand behind us on it. So I don't think we're going to have any issues going forward. There is some paperwork that needs to be done, a special use permit that needs to be acquired, and that requires some surveys and things that we need to get together with a statement of use and everything else. It should just be formality at this point, but it went exceptionally well. It will shape how we use the property, and it's actually going to help me to go more in line with what I originally intended for this property anyway. For those of you who are new to this, don't know what I'm talking about a month and a half ago or so, we purchased a piece of property that is going to serve as a retreat house, a public location in a way. It's not going to be a church where, people gather every Sunday to worship together, as much as it's going to be a retreat house for our congregants all over the world to come to us and to be able to receive the sacraments one-on-one with us. So it's going to be more like personal retreat type of operation. We could probably accommodate up to 3 people, because we do have 3 suites in this.
3 comfortably.
Three comfortably.
Yeah.
And because of the restrictions on the permit that we're going to have, we really can't do more than that anyway. For local people, what that's going to mean is that there's going to be an RSVP kind of process to come to these services, since they are going to be closed services, in the sense that we will live stream them as we always have, and that's going to be the public aspect of it. But it's going to be more of a private, more intimate kind of internal thing for working with our congregants as well as our clients. And now we'll have a place for them to come, and that way we don't have to worry about how do we handle all these people all over the world trying to get our help. Now, well, if you can come to us, we can help you, and that's what it's going to be. So I was worried because the tax commissioner's office more or less implied that we would need to be public, in the sense that the doors are wide open, anybody can come in during open hours, and I was reluctant to do that because that's not what I envisioned for this property. It is a house. It is not a public facility. It is not a church in a traditional sense.
Well, it'd make us do all kinds of stuff that we normally wouldn't do.
Exactly.
We'd have to have the special parking, the handicap parking, the special access, the wheelchair ramps,
guards with guns at the door.
Well, we have that inside. Wink,
Well,
wink,
yeah,
nudge, nudge.
but I mean, let's face it. I mean, we don't always have ushers that are there to be able to take care of that, and we've got liturgical responsibilities at the altar.
Right.
So this is going to work a whole lot better for us doing it this way. So I was concerned because there was some. I guess you could say some suggestion, perhaps, from one of the other offices that we can't really consider ourselves a church unless we have a public place of worship in that traditional large church, build your congregation sense. And I said, but we're not really here to do that. We work with people within their denominations. We don't try to convert them. We don't try to bring them into our church community unless they want to be. We help stabilize them and then send them back home. And so it makes much more sense for us to have a house rather than a church in that building sense. So we were worried that Douglas County wouldn't see it this way. But today I expressed to them, it gave me a very long time, about 40 minutes with us.
It was pretty. I didn't expect them to be with us that long.
No, I thought it was going to be like a 5-minute, tell us what's going on. But they were very attentive. They gave me time to speak and finish what I was saying. And I basically explained from the beginning to the end, all the way back to the Schism of Utrecht. I talked about how,
they got a free history lesson,
how the old Catholics came to be, because I don't think a lot of people realize that there is such a thing as independent Catholicism, and I don't think they even understand where that came from. No, independent Catholics are not people who just decided that they were going to make something up, create a fake church, and call themselves a bishop. Now, that's not how it works. There's still apostolic succession, and that apostolic succession that we all have comes from both the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches. It does. Okay, it's just we come through usually that old Catholic line, and we can maybe do a show to talk about the schism and what the old Catholics are and what independent Catholicism is. I think it might be an enlightening one for some of our audience members, particularly those people who think we're a fake church. You'll realize how stupid you are when you hear the history of how this has been going on for like 300 years. It started in about the mid 1700s, where there was disagreements with, the various bishops there with the Pope and some decisions the Pope had been making. But by the 1860s, 1870s, it had gone too far, and the schism happened. And so we're out of that. But, I don't like schisms. I don't like division. But I'll tell you this, it does help to not have the red tape of the Vatican hanging over our necks. It allows us to help people the way we see fit. And that's the beauty of this. And I think Douglas County agreed. I am in Protestant territory here, so I think they kind of like the rebels. So I think that when they found out that
they were receptive, at least
they were receptive. When they found out we weren't under the Pope, it's like, okay, you're good now. No, I'm just kidding. They were very, very nice and very gracious. But anyway, so we're on track with that. We just have to get the paperwork done, then we can start opening the doors. Well, we have to get the inside ready to go. But anyway, we're getting there. We're making the progress that we need to be able to open this up in the capacity we originally intended. attended. So it's going to be wonderful. I don't think we'll ever be able to have more than about 12 or 15 people there at a time, just so that the permit doesn't, we don't start exceeding the expectations of the permit. But, I don't anticipate ever having more than that anyway. The mission church never did. And the mission church was fully open to the public. And that's why we closed it, because people weren't coming for that. They were coming for help and they wanted to go back to their home churches. Well, now we'll have a place to do that. And that's going to be the wonderful thing about this. And for all of you who are everywhere out there in the world and you're a member of this church, now you have a place to come to see us and receive the sacraments directly. I can hear your confession, you can come to the Eucharist, I can baptize your kids, and then you can go back home, and it works. This is a very unique kind of ministry. I try to explain it to them. Being on international television has definitely changed the dynamic of this church, and we have to accommodate that. It's it's the direction God put us. I really think this was divine inspiration. So we're well on track, and Douglas County seems to be understanding now and very supportive. So that's always a good thing when the local government's on your side. Okay, so we've got a new drink to kind of celebrate the success of this meeting, although I do have a little bit of a headache from it, but I'm not too bad off. I decided let's have something special. So this is Russell's Reserve 13-year-old. Let me tell you a little bit of the story on this. Okay, so essentially this bourbon, is a special edition. You can't typically buy that. You're not going to go to the shelves and find it on your shelves. Okay. This is a special thing that maybe a couple stores get one bottle and they reserve it for their top customers. Embarrassing to say, I am one of my store's top customers.
You lush.
Because I buy a lot of collectors' whiskeys, okay? And so before they call anyone else, they will usually call me and say, we've got 5 special bottles. I'm entitled. I can pick one. They don't let me buy them all. I probably would if I could, but they don't let me. They want save it for all their top people. But they give me first dibs typically, and this was one of the ones out of a selection of 5, and I picked it. So when that happens, I get to buy it, and this is the beauty of it. I get to buy it at primary market prices, which means I only spent $150 on this bottle. I mean, that's a lot for bourbon, but that's actually a really good buy, because the secondary market right now, this is going between $1,200 and $2,500. So it's an exceptionally expensive bottle on the secondary market. On the primary market, not so bad, but you're never going to find it at the primary market unless you have a relationship with the merchants that carry this stuff like I do. And so we're going to indulge in this tonight. This is a really rare treat. So if you want to pour us some.
Bourbon.
Yeah.
All right. And Russell's is definitely on my list of favorites.
The 13 is a whole other bowl game. It is barrel strength, so keep that in mind. You might want a little water with it.
115?
It's in that, it's about that.
Ish?
Ish.
Sorry, that's a Jamie dram.
That's fine. I probably need it tonight. I probably need it tonight. You're going to like this. This is very good bourbon.
You don't need water.
No, it's so smooth.
Nope. You just need a mature palate.
Wow.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I need you to like it. I don't think I'd spend $2,500 on it.
Oh, heck no.
But $150 I think is a steal.
I'm going to spend $2,500. It's going to be on a Kimber Warrior type 45, but
you want a gun, right?
YouTube don't ban us. Yeah, I'd spend that on a firearm, but I wouldn't spend it on something to drink. But.
700 is my limit on Scotch. I don't find that alcohol gets much better after $700 a bottle. I really don't. I think it's mostly just rarity and name.
You can really taste the tannins.
Yeah.
I can.
Well, it was in a barrel for 2 decades.
It's really coming out strong.
That's very long for bourbon because remember, bourbon is fresh oak.
Right.
It's new oak.
Right.
It's not matured oak like Scotch.
Yep.
Matured oak, Scotch can stay in it for decades.
A nice little burn on the back end.
Yeah.
Oh,
but it's not too woody, is it?
No.
Surprisingly, I really thought it was going to be like tasting wood, like eating.
Maybe a little cap full of water would really bring it.
It brings it out.
Yeah. But as it is,
maybe after we can, well, here you go.
As it is, it's fine.
I would be very, very careful with it. Let me give you just a splash.
Just a splash.
Yeah. Just want a few drops.
That'll work.
I'll try it too. I'll just see how it changes. I haven't tried it with water yet.
Bourbon 101, kids.
Just a few drops. That's all it takes.
Oh yeah, that brings it.
Brings it out?
Yeah. I'm not even gonna say anything. Y'all get the opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
It changes, like it's a whole different drink now.
Yeah,
just
that's
2 drops. It's like
that's really good.
whiskey's so fascinating. I love it.
Russell's Reserve, 13-year-old.
13-year-old.
Barrel proof.
You won't find it anymore, but it's out there. If you want to pay a lot for it.
114.8 proof. So yeah, about 115.
Yeah. Okay,
Well done.
let's get to
Well
a
done.
question. And before I do that, I just want to apologize for our late start today. We were having problems with the logins. For simulcasting, it's always a different login for every platform, and somehow the application cleared all my information. So I had to go and dig them out of my phone and type them all back in. That's why we're about 10 minutes late today. So the top of the hour is going to be probably about 7 minutes past instead of the usual, right at 9 o'clock. So watch for that. We're going to be a little bit late today. Okay. So Brandon, let's first see. How are you doing, Brandon?
hello.
I'm sorry. I'm so way ahead of myself now. How you doing tonight, Brandon? Oh, hang on. I don't even have your microphone on. Here we go. There you go.
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah?
Just got my regular Dr. Pepper tonight.
Is it a 23-year-old or is it just a regular?
23 ingredients.
23 ingredients. 23 types of sugar, I think.
Yeah.
And Father Chris, all the way from Australia. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm drinking 4.5 billion-year-old water, so
Well, technically speaking, this is the weird thing about science is that all of the atoms in your body are billions of years old. So in a way, we're really billions of years old. I mean, if you want to really break it down,
Get technical.
we are dust.
Yeah, we are truly the dust of the cosmos. Yeah.
My favorite, anyone who, if there's anybody left on Earth that has a shred of faith in government, this is my favorite story of government. It's actually my second favorite, but the favorite can wait for another time. But they were discussing the New South Wales government. This was years ago, not the current one. So no names, no pack drill. Mm-hmm. But they were discussing how to deal with water shortages. Because we get hot weather here and what have you. And one of the cabinet ministers said, well, if we run out of water, let's just make some more.
Yeah, let's do that.
And now in the entire government, in fact, in the entire parliament at that time, there were only 2 members of parliament that had a science degree, one of whom was my friend who was at the meeting. And he said, I guarantee you that glass of water you're drinking went through Jesus's kidneys. There is no new water on Earth.
No new water on Earth.
Hilarious.
No, absolutely not. It's just basically a continuous distillation system. Yeah, it is one big loop. Yeah.
So, but apart from, obviously, we've had some pretty terrible things happening around here.
Yeah, you have.
Literally either side of where I live, Bondi Junction and Bishop Mari Emmanuel being stabbed. So it's been pretty fraught and. Certainly, I used to live near Bondi Junction, but with the bishop that was stabbed, I had friends in that church who were messaging me at the time.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And so it's been pretty fraught, but
he's okay though, right?
Yeah,
he's okay. And of course I already knew who he was, and as did many people,
did too. Yeah.
Even in America.
Yeah,
because he's got this big YouTube presence, and
and TikTok.
TikTok,
yeah, and the fruit of that has been that his views have skyrocketed of his past sermons and what have you, and so there's some good that can come out of this, but it's it feels a pretty fragile time here in Australia. It feels like just things that have been under the surface are. I know America's well ahead in this, but the things that have been under the surface for a long time, or problems that have been seen as being European or American problems, are now here.
Well, I mean, as long as the governments of the world keep trying to divide us, that's going to keep happening. Mm-hmm. As long as you keep trying to put people against each other, liberal against conservative, Democrat against Republican, whatever, Christian against non-Christian, however you want to break it down.
A box.
Muslim against Jew. You're going to keep creating, because people people love to be victims. They love to be victims. And so if you give a person an opportunity to be a victim, they're going to jump at it, even if it's a subconscious thing. No one wants to ever take responsibility.
And with the 24-hour news cycle, the problem is that the only thing governments can do is pass legislation.
24-hour news for profit cycle, and that's the issue.
Oh, yeah.
News should never be for profit. It should be a nonprofit, mandated nonprofit organization. You should not be allowed legally to make a for-profit news station. I'm totally against that.
Every time there's a news headline, an MP, or a member of Congress, whatever your system is, they say, well, we're going to pass a bill to do X.
Yeah.
And the problem is the people that are making those decisions are the same ones that think you can invent water.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah. Well, you can't. You can't. And
good luck, people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing our part here on this show, I think, to try to, they keep creating wounds, we keep healing them.
Right.
That's how I look at it. All right, Brandon, what's our first question from the ether tonight?
So the first question comes from April. She said, I just finished watching last episode of Vestiges. You talked about a possessed individual levitating. How are they able to do that? Is that just another manifestation of telekinesis?
In a way, I guess you could label it as telekinesis, although I would say it's more involved than that. Really. Yeah, it is preternatural by church definition. So there's two ways to look at this. Okay, we can look at it from the theological vantage point or the theological explanation, which would be basically what Father Chris just said. It's a preternatural ability. Mm-hmm. These things exist outside of the natural, or what we understand to be the natural parts or the physical parts of this universe, which means the rules don't apply the same way. But there is actually metaphysical explanations for this that take it much further than that. And it goes back to what I've been saying since the very beginning of this show, and probably since the beginning of my career, many, many years ago. The universe is not what you think it is. Creation is not what you've been taught to believe it is. Okay? And we exist, I don't want to get too into theoretical physics, but we exist in what is known as a closed system. Okay? And we're part of the closed system. And what does that mean? It means that the universe, you can't be outside of it. There's no way to get outside. You can't leave it. So anything that's in the universe is part of the universe, and that universe is closed. There's no leaving the universe. There's no stepping away from it. Not like the planet. See, this planet's not really a closed system. I mean, it technically is, because a biological organism can't just pick up and leave. If we want to go outside into the to the moon, we can't do that. We need to have special ability to do that, which means we have to have the right technology to get us there, the right technology to protect our biological frailty with, spacesuits and oxygen and all that stuff. But provided that you have that technology available, which we do, you can leave. So in a way, with the right technology, the Earth is not a closed system, but the universe is. There's no vehicle you can take to leave the universe. You're stuck in it. And the universe has programmed into it, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's part of the controls and fail-safes of creation, which I would say is part of the instrumentation of God, that limits what can happen inside here. So, for example, you're not going to be able to walk through a wall. All right, you might want to, but you can't. Okay, you're not going to be able to just take off like Superman and fly.
Oh God, that'd be awesome.
It would be awesome. But there's laws in this universe that prevent that from happening.
That's right.
But things that build the universe, the building blocks of the universe, are actually outside of the system. So the substance upon which God creates has a energetic function that is both within and without, kind of like he is. God is within us in this universe, and he's also existent outside of this universe. He's present inside as well as outside. And their energy of creation is present inside and outside. And with that, anything that exists outside of the closed system doesn't have to follow the rules of the closed system. So things like levitating, however much we would want to do that, we typically cannot do that. But with the aid of these particular energy systems, which could be called supernatural or preternatural abilities, because these are forces that exist outside of the closed system. They can defy what happens inside the closed system. And so things like telekinesis and levitation and some of these seemingly supernatural abilities that you sometimes hear Eastern yogis being able to do, and very advanced Buddhist masters, and you hear of these stories. There's some truth to that, because they are connecting and harnessing energy that exists outside the closed system. So that's how this happens. Now, of course, religion, depending upon which one you believe in, and they're not going to agree on how that energy is manipulated. But for the sake of simplicity here, I like the metaphysical explanation because it applies to all of the different religious viewpoints. Ultimately, it's because something, whether it be, angels and demons or whatever, or whether it be some kind of Buddha nature, or however you want to classify it by religion, at its core, what it is that there's energy that exists both within and without the closed system. And when it's outside the closed system, it doesn't have to follow the same rules of things inside the closed system. So that's how it happens. I know that's a convoluted way of answering it, but it's really the best way and the easiest way to respond to the question.
Didn't you ever, when I was a kid, we did take part in levitation sessions.
Oh, you mean like the table thing?
No, people, stood around with their fingers and then whoosh. So I've witnessed it.
I think that's also the manipulation of the.
I don't commend doing that, by the way. But
I think
but
it's.
We did, and
I think it's manipulation of, like I said, the energy that exists both within and without the universe. And so the laws don't have to apply, but because we're typically not really responsive to or fundamentally aware of that energy outside, we're very focused on just what's happening in the here and now, right in front of us. We're not going to be able to.
For a Christian to ignore that, because a Christian believes that God entered humanity, rose from the dead,
right,
and ascended into heaven, all of which are against the rules of the laws of nature.
Yeah.
Right. And so we believe in a lawgiver, but that lawgiver is not subject to his own laws.
Right. Exactly. It's just like if you build a computer program, you can do things that, the creator of Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog, you can do things that the characters in those games can't do. Things that are inconceivable to the characters in those games, assuming the characters in those games had some form of rudimentary consciousness. They couldn't even comprehend the mind of the programmer, and it's kind of like that. If we're going to use analogies to try to make it simple, that's how it is. So there you go, Brandon. That's the answer to the first question.
Yeah, it'll take me a bit of time to process that.
Okay.
But while we do, the second question, do we know why in extra-canonical sources the serpent in Eden is thought to be the angel Gadriel found in Enoch, or Azazel in the Apocalypse of Abraham?
Yeah, these extra canonical sources are ancient depictions of people trying to make sense in their own way of the existence of evil. And it was particularly important for the Jewish people to have a rationale for this, because when you have an all-powerful, like we talked about during the Epicurean paradox, when you have an all-powerful, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God, evil becomes sort of problematic. And when you also say that there's no competitor to God, which Judaism teaches, it's not like Zoroastrianism where you have an equal competing evil God that's just as powerful and they're always fighting, and we become the playing field upon which the two gods are fighting. Judaism doesn't have that understanding. There's just God. There's nothing else. And evil does not come from some demonic force. Evil comes from man and man's willingness to engage in sin. That's how Judaism explains it. So when you understand it from that vantage point, you have to then create some kind of story or something to be able to explain that, because people will say, look, I don't feel evil. I don't do evil things, I mean, and people don't like to necessarily take responsibility for the wrong that happens. It's much easier to say the devil made me do it than it is to say, yeah, I was an ass. I screwed up.
Which is never true. Never true.
Yeah, never true. The devil can't make you do anything.
Can't make you.
Nothing you were already thinking about doing.
So, yeah, exactly. So, and I really do think we manufacture these personifications of the devil. I really think the devil, in his truest form, if we were to strip away everything, what you'd find there is an egregore in the end. A manifestation of people's evil, which is exactly what Judaism's trying to say with the serpent and all these other, other gods that these other texts like Enoch, Gadriel and Azazel and all these other names that we give, that eventually these became in the Middle Ages associated with like fallen angels and stuff, because it's a way of trying to bring understanding and meaning to something that's very confusing. Why does evil exist if God is good? That's always the question, right? And people really struggle with that answer. And it really does take exceptional metaphysical understanding to really wrap your head around it.
There's also the sort of, what we classically refer to as the types and shadows. There's the great hymn, types and shadows have their ending, for the newer rite is here. It's about the Eucharist.
Yeah.
And I think, and it includes what you've just described. The Christian claim is that, if you remember, Jesus said the very rocks would cry out. Mm-hmm. If I didn't speak, the very rocks would cry out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's to say that from the dawn of time, human beings have had within them the awareness of the problem of sin and of conscience and of doing wrong, and the eternal remedy for that was already baked into the cake. That when God created the heavens and the earth, He knew He was going to enter it to redeem it, and so all of these things point towards the culmination of that comes in Christ, which is why Jesus is a different character to every other character in history, because he was pre-announced. Everything about the history of the human race, not just revealed in the Jewish scriptures, but in remote tribes in the Amazon that had never even been heard of at that time, had been pointing towards this remedy for the human condition. And so when Christ comes, He fulfills that.
Yeah.
He does that in a very unexpected way. And that's why, the Christian mission is not to say, we've created this new religion for you to follow. It's to say, no, this is in fact what's been revealed from the dawn of time. And so explanations like the one contained in the question are all part of that sort of seeking towards understanding that problem, which, as Christians, we believe is fulfilled in Christ. But that's not, we can't just put our hands in our pockets and say, right, we've sorted it. It's to say we're constantly wrestling with that, because we're also experiencing it in our own lives.
Well, it's like the serpent in the Garden of Eden creates a problem, I think, in people's minds, because they start to take things too literal. In Judaism, the serpent in the garden was not the devil. It's not Satan or precursor to Satan. It's what is referred to as Yetzer Hara. That's that proclivity within man to do the wrong thing, to be selfish, to be egotistical or egocentric, and to do what feels good instead of what perhaps is better for the greater good or God's will. So
can you go ahead and say that again? Like just that one part. Can you say that again?
Yetzer Hara?
Yetzer Hara. Yeah, Yetzer Hara. It is.
It's not the devil?
No, absolutely not. And the point that we need to understand here is that to think that that's the devil is the equivalent of like watching these old cartoons or watching like these sitcoms where, you know, the main character has a moral conundrum, and all of a sudden this little angel appears in their shoulder that looks just like them and starts saying, oh, now, you need to be calm about this and really think things through. And then all of a sudden a devil version of them pops up on the other shoulder and says, no, go do it. It's okay. You know, and it would be like a person watching that on a sitcom or in a cartoon and saying, oh, those people are, that devil and angel's real. They're really here.
Yeah,
they're really
inside.
on my shoulders. And it's like, yeah, they're there. Yes, like you said, on the inside, in an ethereal sense, that this is portraying a certain fundamental truth. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a literal thing like these little angels on your shoulder. It's like, it's a representation of the conscience, right? Is what it really is.
And the irony is, therefore, it's far more real.
Yeah, more real, exactly.
Because it's to say that, this tempting serpent is in you as well, like, you know. And so it's just, you know, rather than saying, oh, let's just have this kind of really basic understanding of, oh, these two people walking in a garden and there's this snake, you know, it's no, you're the one walking through the garden, you're the beloved of God, created in his image and likeness, and the serpent is your
which means, Father,
self-will and ego.
Which means that it is both the Yetzirah and it is still the devil. In a way,
I agree.
We've made it the devil because we've taken that.
Well, I agree.
Yeah, we've taken that archetype and projected it outward into something, usually out of guilt and fear. Because guilt and fear is what keeps us from taking responsibility. And so we create an egregore of our fears. We create an egregore of our guilt, and it becomes a monster that is
it begins to define us too.
And it does.
And that's the whole, and it shapes us, and you get twisted and turned in on yourself, which is invocatus in se. That's how St. Augustine describes sin. You know, you turned in on yourself.
Correct.
And so, but yeah, it's super real. It's like, you know, people think, oh, is it allegory or is it true? Allegories are true.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a false division that people are making.
Yes.
And, you know, part of the temptation to do that, well, actually, this is demonic, right? It's so the devil can convince us he doesn't exist. Right. You know, it's that, you know, it's just that story that those silly Christians and Jews talk about. You know,
but see, that's the thing. Silly stories are truer than your regular life. That's the problem. Yeah. So in a sense, when theology says that is the devil, it's not wrong. It's just not the devil the way you think it is. It's actually a far worse devil. That shallow surface understanding leads to other. I know we've answered this question so many times on this show, and I'm sure in your life, Bishop Brian, you've answered this a lot of times. Why does God create the serpent? You know, so that's a question that's an understandable question if you have only if you're just looking at a very surface level kind of historical view of Genesis. Sure. You know, that's a logical question to ask. But actually, if you understand the far deeper meaning of what that means, then you wouldn't ask that question. You wouldn't ask it.
In other words, God does not create the problem.
No.
Our God gives us a wonderful gift of being able to choose right from wrong, and we choose wrong. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, so it's not that God creates the problem. God gives us a gift and we abuse the gift.
If we're going to look at the events of the Garden of Eden as history, which we can't really, but let's just play the game of the literalist for a minute.
It's written.
You know, let's play the game. Let's pretend it's historical. All right. So who created the serpent? Why was he there in the first place? Well, you could say that the Garden of Eden in its perfection manifested whatever Adam and Eve needed in that moment. And what they needed in that moment was to exercise their free will. And that was the facilitator of that action. It also led, of course, to the old happy fault, you know, that we love on Easter. So, you know, it had divine providence to it, but it, you know, where did it come from? It came from us. It came from our desire for it. That's where it manifested exactly what we needed in order to realize. I really think in order to become perfect, one has to fall first. I really do. I think that is a necessary part of the process. uncreated beings don't need this. Of course, like God, for example, would not need that.
Angels.
Well, angels, I guess, are. I don't know if they're necessarily uncreated. They are part of the. I mean, they are a creature,
Part of creation.
but they're perfect. But you could say, though, that because they weren't granted freedom like we are, it's not the same issue that we have. God wanted us to be exactly like Him. And that's.
I heard an analogy of the angels that said, they're all head and no heart because they're perfect intellect.
That's a good way to put it.
They're all head and no heart.
Yeah, it is like pure intellect, and that's essentially what it is. And why it's pure incorporeality. Why they don't have any physical form, because there is nothing other than just pure intelligence there. It doesn't need form. It's kind of like if you could just put a person. Turn your psyche into a person, it wouldn't have necessarily any physicality to it. You need to have, thoughts don't have any form. Okay. So that's that's something that's almost a subject for an entire show. But
you got a big answer to that question.
Yeah, big answer.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's sufficient.
Stick a pin in that. Might need an episode on it.
What's our next one, Brandon? Unless you have more to add to it.
No, I'm good to add it.
Okay.
We can go to the third question.
Okay.
This is from Danielle. La Llorona, would you classify it/her as a wrathful spirit? Obviously, it's also became legendary, so all the people focused on the legend could have produced an egregore by now. What are your thoughts on this spirit?
I would say that it would be unlikely to be a wrathful spirit because I've never known a wrathful spirit to be able to maintain cohesion for that length of time. Now, that's not to say it couldn't have started as that and became an egregore later, because it became sort of legendary, and then people started creating an egregore out of the original spirit. So it could have been one and then became something else and is now ascribed to the same thing, but they're actually two very different spirits. Or it could be that it was always an egregore. It was just a legend that became so infused into people's consciousness that it started to project outwards.
I don't think it's anything different than Slender Man or the Rake.
I think it's exactly like that.
Where it became such
Go
ahead.
It does sort of carry the characteristics of the devil, though, doesn't it? I mean,
it's another. I think another archetype.
False worship.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it could be demonic.
I mean, well, they're all demonic by my classification system.
Sure.
I consider all of them to be types of demons.
I mean, fallen angel demonic.
Oh, fallen angel. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't. It's possible, but I think it doesn't have a lot of the same characteristics of what I've seen from that fallen angel category. There's a certain sophistication and cunning that I have encountered with fallen angels that I have never experienced with any of the other three categories. And because there's just so much legend behind this and not really a whole lot of theology to back it up, it really seems for me to fall more into that egregore category, more of a created type of thing, which is no less. In fact, anyone that's listened to me talk about this, sometimes the created are far worse than the fallen angels.
There's one way to find out. Yeah. We get a La Llorona case.
Well, I mean, one could come from Mexico. You never know.
Out.
I love Mexico. Hey. I'll take any chance to go down there.
The food.
I know the food and the mezcal. The mezcal. All right. So I think that's the best way. Fallen angel is possible, of course. I've never encountered this in the field, so I can't really testify to it in any kind. I can only speculate as to what it sounds like based upon what people tell me or what I know. Jamie's going to be the first one to tell you, okay, there's so many times where we hear a case or we get told that there's a case, or Ghost Adventures calls and says we've got a case, and they tell me everything there is about it. And then I make up my mind and say, well, that sounds a lot like this. And it sounds a lot. And then we get into the case and it's nothing like that. So it's, I can only speculate. And until I work a case with this entity, I can't really say with any certainty what it is, but it doesn't seem to have the characteristics of a wrathful spirit anymore. And so if it started as one, it's definitely not that anymore, and it's definitely something else now that's just being ascribed to that original story. I don't think the wrathful spirit works for that one. That's just my personal professional opinion on it. So yeah. So there you go. Is that good? Is that good?
I hope so.
Okay. Well, then we got through all the questions. I didn't think we'd get through all the questions. Maybe we'll be able to start, take our break at the top of the hour like we originally planned to.
Yeah, we got everybody here.
And get back on track. And then we can have some extra time with our guests. I think that sounds like a great thing.
That'd be wonderful.
But yeah, I want to let me take the time now before we go to break. It's still too early to go to break. Let me talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing here tonight and why we're doing this show. Okay. As you all know, I am truly fascinated with any kind of afterlife discussion because, let's face it, that's been the bulk of my field work, isn't it? As an exorcist, I am very rarely ever doing anything with demons. Most of the time, what I'm doing is I'm trying to help the dead. And because the dead are, at least when I get involved, when there's a case bad enough that I need to get involved, these are people who are stuck. These are people that are terrified. They don't know what's happened to them. And my job as a pastor is no different to the living as it is to the dead. My obligation is the same. My goal is to help them find the peace of God. That's it. There's nothing more than that. My job is not to convert people. My job is to not convince people. My job is to not, shove the Bible down people's throats until they, swallow it. My job is to help them find peace in God, whatever that means to them, which is why, when we had our little meeting today with Douglas County, I was explaining some of this, why it's fresh on my mind. I was explaining to the zoning and planning department about our ministry for our new property. We help everybody. Muslim, Jew, we've had cases come in from Saudi Arabia. We've helped a lot of pagans.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not collecting them. It's not like, oh, you better be a Christian now. No, we don't do that. I have no desire I have no reason to do that. My goal is to help them find peace. And I think hopefully
That's
we've
the
done
Holy
that.
Spirit's job.
That is the Holy
Right.
Spirit's job. It's like, let the Holy Spirit guide them where they need to go. My job is
If
to
they
just
find healing here, maybe they'll ask their own questions.
well, that's
you
true.
know?
That's a way to look at it.
Free will.
But
And that's better.
yeah, and it is better because it takes the heaviness off of my shoulders and puts it on God's where it belongs. It's my job is to act as facilitator, and I think we do a good job of that. I think we do a good job of that. But the point is that so much of my work is helping people that need to be helped, and whether they're dead or alive. Demons are very rarely ever part of the mix. Being an exorcist is very, I was trying to explain this to them. I think it scares them because in my email title, when I send an email out, and of course I don't change it when I'm talking to the government any more than I do when I'm talking to a client or another priest, it says right there, exorcist bishop. So I think that scares some people when they see it, particularly here in the South where it's very Bible belt and devil, demons and scare people. They scare people. They shouldn't, but they do. And so I had to explain, look, exorcism is kind of the term has a preconceived notion behind it. I don't usually deal with demons. Most of the time I'm helping people find peace, and they've lost their peace somewhere along the way, and I'm here to help them get it back. And so I do this with the dead too. So I'm very fascinated by it. And one thing I have noticed is that there is, and it doesn't get talked about, a very large number of negative near-death experiences. Not just from people who literally die and come back, like Jamie, 3 times.
Yeah.
But also with when we interact with the dead. And I'm able to maybe have a little bit of a rudimentary conversation with them in my field work. And I ask them, what's going on with them, and the things that they say and the things they convey is pure terror. And of course, as you all know, right, before I was a Catholic bishop, I was a Buddhist for more than a decade. My wife and I were married by a Buddhist nun in a Buddhist temple.
Yep.
And we had to have our wedding, of course, sacramentalized by the Ruthenian Church when we came back to the church as Christians. But I mean, I spent a large part of my life as a Buddhist, and I've said so many times before that I have. My Catholicism only started to mean something after being Buddhist. So none of my Buddhism left me. It's still there. And Buddhism has a very unique position on what happens after we die. They call it the Bardo. There's a whole book that the Tibetans wrote on it, the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it describes this process. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But a lot of these near-death experiences fall, in my opinion, into that Bardo category, and I find this very interesting. We've had Kathy on, who we're going to meet here. If you're new to her, she was on the show several seasons ago, and she had an experience, as I recall, that was very much consistent with what I understand to be the Bardo in Buddhism. It works, and it might be controversial for some, but it works. Then we had Regan on several times, and Regan's talked about his experiences with his work and how he doesn't come across negative near-death experiences. I think he said last time on the show. And so I find that's really interesting because I'm going to read from you a list of them when I come back from the break in a moment. I'm going to read to you a list of negative near-death experiences that are purely terrifying from a medical journal. This is from a medical research team that studied this. So it's not just like loosey-goosey stuff, it's not just some guy out there that did this, collected these as a hobby on his podcast. This is actual scientific research in a accepted medical journal, a scientific journal, and they are fascinating. And so I think there's a lot to the state of mind, and I think when Regan talks of his experiences, there is so much positivity to his methodology that shapes a lot of what is being experienced, because they're going into this with great positivity. But there's so many people that are going into these experiences with nothing but loathing and hate for their own lives and hate for themselves. And I think that might attribute to a lot of this. And Kathy kind of alluded to that last time she was on the show. So we're going to have both of these wonderful guests on in the next 2 hours. And the third hour, you'll be able to ask them questions if you have any. But we're going to try to get to the bottom of negative near-death experiences. We'll talk about some of the good ones, too, when we come back, okay? So we'll take our break now. And you don't want to miss this one. And you definitely don't want to miss these stories from the medical journal. They are terrifying. Just wait, okay? We'll be back after this. Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark, as we get ready here to begin with our topic tonight, the near-death experience, and focusing in on the nature of the negative ones as well as the positive ones. We have returning guests Regan Forston and Kathy McDaniel. We are so excited to have them on this very special panel, on this very special show, to get to the bottom of what's really going on here with these near-death experiences. Are they real? Are they something else? And I'm going to share with you here right now, in just a few seconds, some of the worst ones I've ever heard. Pure terror. You'll see. We'll be right back in just a moment. Okay, so before I bring our guests on and we start this party, we're going to review, and I want to do this so that our guests can hear them, because this is going to be some of the, I think, the meat of tonight's episode. And we love getting down to the meat, don't we? But this is from the National Library of Medicine, the Missouri Medicine, or the Journal of Missouri State Medical Association. Okay, so it's the Missouri Medicine Journal, and it talks of three primary distressing near-death experiences. Okay, so we're going to go through those three, and I'm going to give you examples of each one directly from the journal. The categories are inverse NDEs, the void NDEs, and hellish NDEs. Okay. So let's look at some of these. Okay. And you tell me what you think, and we'll start the basis with our guests here as soon as I get through them. Okay. So in some NDEs, features usually reported in other NDEs as pleasurable are perceived as hostile or threatening. A man thrown from his horse found himself floating at, and these are all true stories now, this is from actual medical research. A man thrown from his horse found himself floating at treetop height, watching emergency medical technicians working over his body. No, this isn't right, he screamed. Put me back. But they did not hear him. Next, he was shooting through darkness towards a bright light, flashing past shadowy people who seemed to be deceased family members waiting. He was panic-stricken by the bizarre scenario and his inability to affect what was happening. A woman in childbirth, number 2. A woman in childbirth felt her spirit separate from her body and fly into space at tremendous speed, then saw a small ball of light rushing toward her. It became bigger and bigger as it came toward me, she said. And then she said, I realized that we were on a collision course, and it terrified me. I saw the blinding white light come right at me, and it engulfed me. And lastly, from this collection, a woman collapsed from hypothermia and began re-experiencing her entire life. I was filled with such sadness and experienced a great deal of depression. All of these are very consistent so far with what we know of near-death experiences, even the positive ones. There's usually a life review, or at least a lot of people report a life review of some kind. There is a light, a white light. Sometimes people report being afraid of the light. Sometimes they interpret it to be peace or the entrance to heaven. In these cases, the inverse NDEs, it is content that looks pleasurable to some, but can be terrifying to others, I guess, again, based upon the person's experience. And remember, these are not anecdotes. I'm not sharing with you anecdotes here. These are actual reports that have been researched by the medical professionals. Now let's talk about some examples of the void NDEs. This is where it gets really kind of horrific, although it gets really bad with the hell ones. We'll see that in a minute. The NDE of the void is an ontological encounter with a perceived vast emptiness. This is very consistent with what Jamie had.
Yep.
Often a devastating scenario of aloneness, isolation, sometimes annihilation. A woman in childbirth found herself abruptly flying over the hospital and in deep empty space. A group of circular entities informed her she never existed, that she had been allowed to imagine her life, but it was a joke. She was not real. She argued with facts about her life and descriptions of Earth. No, they said, none of that had ever been real. This was all there was. She was alone in space. Terrifying, isn't it? Another woman in childbirth felt herself floating on water, but at a certain point, it was no longer a peaceful feeling. It had become pure hell. She says, I had become a light out in the heavens, and I was screaming, but no sound was going forth. It was worse than any nightmare. I was spinning around, and I realized that this was eternity. This was what forever was going to be. I felt the aloneness, the emptiness of space, the vastness of the universe, except for me, a mere ball of light screaming. Another case, a woman who attempted suicide felt herself sucked into a void. I was being drawn into this dark abyss or tunnel or void. I was not aware of my body as I know it. I was terrified. I felt terror. I had expected nothingness. I expected the big sleep. I expected oblivion. And I found now that I was going to another plane, and it frightened me. I wanted nothingness, but this force was pulling me somewhere I didn't want to go, but I never got beyond the fog. This sounds so much like the Jewish notion of Sheol. It absolutely sounds like true hell, not the pitchforks and the demons from the Middle Ages. We're talking about the original Judeo-Christian concept of hell, Sheol, or in the pagan world, Hades. This is what it was. This would have been a description that you would have seen. All right, last one from this collection. A man who was attacked by a hitchhiker felt himself rise out of his body. He says, I suddenly was surrounded by total blackness, floating in nothing but black space with no up, no down, left or right.
I know exactly what he's feeling.
You've had that one, yeah.
Yep.
What seemed like an eternity went by. I fully lived in this misery. I was only allowed to think and reflect. Again, very consistent with Sheol. All right, now we get to the real disturbing ones. These are the third and final category of negative NDEs, referred to as the hellish NDEs. Let's look at these, and then we'll start our discussion with our panel. Okay, case one, overtly hellish experiences may be the least common type of distressing NDE. So let's be clear about that. In their research, they found that the hell ones are rare, which is consistent with what Regan has told us in the past, that he hasn't really come across these. You probably won't. Kathy is an exception here, but Jamie is not. Jamie did not experience a hellish NDE. She had more of the void kind, but we're going to talk about that. So let's read some of these, and then we'll get into it. A man in heart failure felt himself falling into the depths of the earth. At the bottom was a set of high, rusty gates, which he perceived as the gates of hell. Panic-stricken, he managed to scramble back up to daylight. So got out of it. Which is consistent with Kathy's story. We'll see in a bit. You know, she had a different series of events, but she got out. that's the story. She got out of hell.
You're running the hill. Keep on going.
Keep on going. Right. A woman was being escorted through a frighteningly desolate landscape and saw a group of wandering spirits. They looked lost and in pain, but her guide indicated she was not allowed to help them. Again, very consistent with Jewish notions of Sheol. An atheistic university professor with an intestinal rupture experienced being maliciously pinched, then torn apart by malevolent beings.
That started to happen to me.
You started to get that one.
They didn't finish.
You got out before it reached that point. A woman who hemorrhaged from a ruptured fallopian tube reported an NDE involving horrific beings with gray, gelatinous appendages grasping and clawing at her. The sounds of their guttural moaning and the indescribable stench still remain after 41 years later, she said.
She was able to bring that stench back with her.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, she still can't forget it. That's how real it was. There was no benign being of light, no life video, nothing beautiful or pleasant. And the last one, a woman who attempted suicide felt her body sliding downward in a cold, dark, watery environment. When I reached the bottom, she said, it resembled the entrance of to a cave with what looked like webs hanging. I heard cries, wails, moans, and the gnashing of teeth. I saw these beings that resembled humans with the shape of a head and body, but they were ugly and grotesque. They were frightening and sounded like they were tormented in agony. Sounds very much like the very medieval style, Dante's Inferno style of hell. Those are all the case studies and some of the ones that I wanted to share with you that I think will set the stage tonight for our topic. And we have some wonderful guests for you.
Yes, we do.
We have today, and we are delighted to welcome back our two esteemed guests. First, joining us tonight is Regan, a clinical hypnotherapist and certified Life Between Lives facilitator with the Newton Institute. He's an acclaimed author with titles like Newest Research Proves Reincarnation is Real and 3 hours, 33 Minutes in Heaven. With his specialization in hypnotherapy, Regan addresses a variety of issues, including trauma, anxiety, and spirituality, enhancing the lives of thousands. Joining us also is Kathy McDaniel, whose life was transformed following a near-death experience during a battle with lung failure in 1999. This profound event not only altered her religious views, but deepened her spirituality. A respected speaker and active participant in the International Association of Near-Death Studies, Kathy uses her experience to spread hope and the message of unconditional love through various platforms, including podcasts and public speaking. Together, they bring a wealth of knowledge and inspirational stories to our discussion on near-death experiences. Let us now welcome both Regan and Kathy to tonight's show. How are you both doing? We're so happy to have you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So let's get started. Let's just jump right in. So, Regan, you correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talked about near-death experiences in the past, you had said, and I found it fascinating because we've had several guests on this show in the past that have come on just to talk about negative NDEs, and Kathy's kind of interesting because she's had both, in the same experience too. It's like it started out bad and it ended up good. You said that you, in all of these cases, you studied like hundreds or thousands. You haven't come across the negative ones in your work. So what are your thoughts on that? And what did you think of the ones that we read from that journal?
We've just passed 70,000 now. We've had, sessions. And
not one negative one.
Yeah, amongst all of us therapists, we have not really experienced any what we would call hellish experiences. We have, though, however, had a few cases where people in the first part of their sessions interpret something as evil or that, but because of the fact that this is all done with a facilitator, there's a big difference here. When you have a facilitator there, they're explaining their experience. So we're trained to just say, hey, wait a minute, let's take a closer look at it. He says, you're totally safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. Let's calm down for a minute. Now, this is a classic case that from a Newton thing. There was a minister that said, hey, I just want to see if this is real or not. So he has this experience. All of a sudden, he's in the afterlife and he's in trance. And all of a sudden, he's like starts to scream and he says, oh, my God, the devil, I'm so. And so the therapist said, hey, wait a minute. Let's just hang on. You're safe. Let's just kind of ease in a little closer to the devil a little bit and let's see what's really going on. And then the client in trance starts laughing hysterically. And it was a guide that was taking off horns and stuff like this and said, look, I just wanted to scare the hell out of you like you've been doing to your parishioners for 20 years.
See, Father Chris, that's what you got to look forward to, Father. That's what you got to look forward to.
But I just had a realization. I had a big realization just now listening what happened.
Okay.
The people that come to me, they're prepared to go to the afterlife. In other words, I send them homework and everything, and they fill out what questions they want to have answered. They talk about their crazy abuses and things and awful things that have happened to them in their life. And so they come prepared to have a session, okay?
Right.
With near experiences, it's just unexpected. You're just thrown into this thing with no facilitator or anybody to keep you calm or to help help you kind of navigate through things. And depending, I think, on the person's state of mind and where they're at, and there, a lot of them just had trauma, complete trauma to their physical bodies happen. I can see why they would have some sort of negative experiences. And hi, Kathy. I just wanted to say hi there too. I read your book, and it's only the first book I read from start to finish without stopping. I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like,
that's awesome. We want to put you two together so you can collaborate.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm thinking the whole time about that and going, oh my gosh, I hope I never would have to experience that. I had 2 similar things happen, but it was before I went to the afterlife. It happened in the dream state, but it was kind of, if I had woke up and I wasn't spiritual at the time, I would have thought it as a hellish example. But I'm in the dream, and all of a sudden I'm a warrior, and then all of a sudden this evil on horse starts coming at me, and I'm having to sword fight him, and it was like forever. And then another one showed up, and I'm already about out of, and then another one, like these 4 hellish men on horseback, and what was so awful was my whole body was just soaked in sweat. And I woke up for a minute. I went in and I changed clothes. I went back in, and there they were, and I had to start fighting them all over again.
Oh, wow.
My goodness.
But then something, because I was on a spiritual path at the time, my inner self said, hey, okay, you sing a spiritual word or something like this to help you. And I sang a word called Hugh, which is an ancient name for God. And immediately a clear plexiglass thing went between me and them, and they were banging and banging on the plexiglass, and I was standing there going, gotcha, But then when I woke up, I realized that what I was fighting is the passions of the mind. Each one, I think, represented a different one.
Interesting.
And I felt good. And I wrote in my journal, says, I think I just passed a test.
Oh,
It was, yeah. Like when you're picking those blackberries and you see that there's acres and acres of them, and you're having the thorns, and I'm thinking, I want to read the next page. What's she gonna do? Is she gonna get thorned to death and bleed to death? But no, you just went right in there and kept at him, and then you were transported somewhere else. And in my mind, I went, she just passed a test.
I felt like I passed a test too. Yeah.
She passed the test. And with the babies, maybe you'll tell some of your story. I don't want to take away from you telling your story.
That's okay.
Okay. But because of what I knew you said happened earlier in your life there, and the babies were there, and then I could see, oh my gosh, people that have what happened to you in that, when that thing happens, as human beings, we can't help avoid having a lot of guilt or sadness, or what if I'd have done something different? It really, I see people in regular therapy that I have to help them with because of those instances. And when you got through that, I went, oh my God, she's got above it. And I wondered, where's this going? Is she going to get out of hell? They kept throwing stuff at you and throwing, but you were like a spiritual warrior. You didn't,
Kathy, could you give we've had so many new audience members, and now we simulcast. We weren't doing that when you were first on this show, and we now have like hundreds of live listeners. We were nowhere near that at the time, and we have thousands, if not tens of thousands of downloads every month on this show. So lots of new people are watching and listening that might not have heard your story. Could you give maybe just a brief recap of what happened?
Oh, wow. Well, I started off in the void. I mean, I had lung failure. They put me into a drug-induced coma. And last thing he said is that you won't be able to remember a thing, right? Well, here we are 25 years later. Yeah. That's because that takes place in your soul, not in your brain. But I found myself in the void, and I wasn't frightened, but it was dark. There was no sound. And, I was just hanging out. And then it started with the fog and the moans and the screaming and the demon's voice that came out and said, you know where you are? And of course there was only one answer, and I just said, hell. And then this maniacal laugh, and I went running into the darkness. And mine was a series of segments. And after 25 years, I've met quite a few people that have had this the hellish experiences, and so we're kind of putting together what we think is happening here. And I don't know. I think I'll just cut to the chase. My first segment was in a bombed out city, fires, people screaming, running all over the place. I just dropped in, and I had no idea what was going on. I knew it was something terrible. I didn't know if it was an atomic war had started, if the aliens had landed. I just knew that I had to find someplace safe. There were creatures wandering around. I tried, but anyway, I fell trying to get over a fence, and I thought, oh, criminy, this is going to hurt. And then the lights would go out, the lights would come up, and I'd be in a totally different situation. One that Regan referred to as the demon. I'm standing there looking at this huge Yeti looking thing, and he wants me to cut down all these berry bushes, and he says he'll get me out if I can do that. And of course, he gave me a pair of kindergarten scissors, and as far as I could see were these dreaded blackberry bushes. So I was a brat, my book is Misfit in Hell. And I thought, all right, sport, I'll take you on. So I was cutting these things. And of course I cut one, and then it grew back, and the demon's laughing. So I just kept at it. And that I guess they thought, well, she passed that test, like you said. Yeah. So then I would find myself in another situation. The one with the babies he refers to is I was a pro-lifer, worked for Birthright. And so now I'm thrown into this abortion clinic where I've got to pick up the poor pieces of these babies and transport them into this humongous room, look like a Costco, with piles of these little mutilated babies. And I came back and I told the demon, no, I'm not doing that job. Find me something else. I'm not doing it. And he said, just going to get worse. And again, lights went out, lights came up. I was on a road in between times, the road to nowhere. I thought I was on a treadmill for a while, but it lead me to these other places. And it was getting, there's no time over there. It's always this constant now. And I was starting to get a little leery about what was going on. I never felt dead. I mean, your soul is you. Just because you don't have a body doesn't mean it's not you. There was several things that happened there. One, the worst ones was the zombies, the zombie guys and gals, and, a gang rape. What can I say? It was bad. Yeah. And then they told me now I was going to start looking like them because I couldn't die. It went into, now I got a demon lady that's taken us all into this tundra out in the snow as poor ruined women like myself. And we get to this shack, with no insulation. It's freezing, cold as hell is a real thing. And I was really getting I knew despair. I could not despair. I knew that was the unforgivable sin, right? So I kept hanging in there, but I was starting to think maybe this wasn't going to work out. But anyway, I asked the demon lady, I says, I've been here a while. And it's a particularly dark, heavy day, for want of a better word. Is there something I don't know? And she says, well, it's Christmas on Earth. That's always the worst day in hell. And I thought, hell? It dawned on me. Oh, my goodness, and then I was mad. I thought, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be here. And so I thought, all right. And I started singing a Christmas carol. I thought that'll tick her off. And we did the Away in a Manger. The girls start singing along with me, and Away in a Manger, no crib for his bed, the little Lord. And when I got to that spot, she leapt at me screaming, shut up. And I closed my eyes because I thought, well, here we go. I'll go to another place. But this time it was like I was infused with this love and bliss and joy, and I'm tumbling in this light and love, and it's just ineffable. You can't describe how awesome that is, and you're just so happy. And then it kind of filtered down a little bit, and I could see I was sort of in this place with lots of white, but it was nice. And I had been caring for my best friend before I got sick for about 8-9 months. He had leukemia and he died. And that was part of my grief. And I got sick. And so anyway, there he is. He's standing there. He died the month before me. And he looks great. his hair's grown back. He looks about 35 instead of 53. He's wearing a sweater I gave him for Christmas, and he's just so excited to see me. And I thought, ooh, I'm not going to tell him he's dead, because that'll ruin his day. And he started laughing, and I thought, wait a minute, something telepathic just happened there. And I thought, oh my gosh, if he's dead, then I'm dead, and I'm in heaven, and this is like too great. I says, why are you standing there? Show me around, So he got a little closer and said, nah, Kathy, you still got too much left to do. And I thought, oh no, they're throwing me out. I said, no, absolutely.
Just when it was getting good, right? You're getting thrown out again.
Are you kidding me? So, boom, back I go.
Yeah.
And of course, wake up out of a coma, and there's these people milling around, and the lights are too bright. And I thought, back in hell.
The lights are always bright.
And then my daughter says, Mom's back. And my mom says, oh, we had a prayer circle going around the world. We brought you back. And I thought, if I could get my hands on you, woman, don't you ever do that again. Later on, she says, don't worry, we won't. I was very not gracious about that at all.
Right.
So that was kind of my trip. And then, from then out, trying to figure out what the Sam Hill was that all about.
Yeah.
And as far as Regan, about not hearing about the negative ones, it's very shaming to have that experience. People have all, the puppies and the butterflies and all, and then you got to say, well, I got gang raped, by demons. It doesn't fly. Nobody wants to talk to you about it. So you clam up and you feel terrible, and you don't want it to happen to you again. It's an awful way to live. I did that for 10 years until I finally found ions. And I'm told the distressing ones are 12 to 20%. So there's a lot of us hiding under rocks out there.
Yeah.
And so with Ian's approval, I've started a near-death, distressing near-death experience sharing group, which is growing by leaps and bounds because people finally have a safe place to share this. And,
I need to join the group.
Because we're getting together and talking about it and saying, well, you think maybe this was part of it or that was part of it? We've come up with some pretty, I think, good ideas of what that's all about. And it's not that bad people have bad experiences or good people have good experiences. That has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
I feel like it was what I'm going to jump in here with my statistics because I've been doing this for 25 years.
Sure.
I find that at least 85% of the people that I talked to that had distressing near-death experiences were Roman Catholic.
Interesting.
And I believe that's because we are taught from 6 years old, we're going to go to purgatory. It doesn't matter if Jesus saved me. It doesn't matter if I'm this or that. Nobody is pure enough. Mother Teresa, St. Francis, maybe. But the rest of us are going to go to purgatory. And so you get that
with a particular
ingrained
view of purgatory, which is very unhelpful.
Yeah.
Purgatory is hell, but you get out. If you say enough rosaries and you get 200 days indulgence for that, and then, it's a math thing. So I think that's what happened to a lot of us. We manifest this because we expect it. And I'm of a mind that we're the ones that come back. And the message is God is all loving and all forgiving and would never condemn anybody. Get that rot out of your brain and out of your soul.
That's the same thing we're finding in our research. Yeah, same thing. That's the same thing we're finding in our research. When people have people on the other side. See, some people, I've had people that wanted to have this experience, but they know what I do, but they waited for years and they finally said, okay, the reason I didn't want to do it is I've done so many bad things. And I'm afraid when I get over there that I'm going to be judged and it's going to be horrible what I have to go through. And I say, that's the least thing that you need to worry about. And when they finally get over there as a counsel and they're talking about their life, it's nothing. People there having this experience, they just feel like a shower of love constantly.
Yes.
A shower of love that way. Sorry to interrupt you, Kathy.
No, you guys are good. If I could, Jamie, if you could take a moment now, I'm not sure. I think Kathy might have heard your. I know Regan did, but if you could just give another recap, a brief one of your negative NDE, so that we can have the three here to talk about, because I'm finding this fascinating, and then I have some thoughts I want to get out there.
I had some similar experiences to Kathy, as far as the
you had a void one, right?
I did have a void one. So, got hit by a DUI driver on my Harley Davidson. Was nearly cut in half. I was awake the entire time. Just trying to condense this a little bit. Medic showed up. I can hear them talking about me. They're basically saying I'm bleeding out. They had to call Life Flight. So last thing I remember was them trying to get me on the gurney to go to the helicopter. I remember hearing the helicopter. And they're like, we're going to have to put you out, honey. And I said, I know. And the last thing I said was, got him in your hands. Well, they put me out. There was nothing. I mean, nothing. And then all of a sudden, I felt my consciousness come back to me. And I was in a room. I could see my parents, who live in Illinois, by the way, but they did get flown down. God bless my law enforcement family. They took care of my family.
Yeah.
So I could see and hear my parents in another room, and I was in this dark room on a gurney. I was strapped down, and there was a figure like Satan in the corner. And I'm really condensing this because of time, but
of course.
I remember looking at him, and he said something to the effect of, Punisher. And these little creatures started crawling over me, and I can only describe it as little piranhas starting to bite me and consume me. And I started to say, hey, this isn't going to end well. And I thought I was in hell. And so I remember saying, I am a soldier of St. Michael, you cannot have me. And then I said, I'm a child of Christ, you cannot have me. And then I said, I think one more time, I was very angry. I said, I am a soldier of St. Michael, you cannot have me. And then all of a sudden, I felt a hand come down, grab me by my shirt, and I felt myself go up, and then I woke up in the hospital room and looked at my mother's face.
How long did that feel to you, that length of time?
It felt almost instantaneous, but in reality, it was a week.
So you were out a week.
I was in a coma for a week.
But that event
that you described was instantaneous. There was no time. Everything was dark. I could kind of see myself, but not see myself. My soul was there. I could feel my consciousness. I knew where I was. I could feel, I could feel everything, but I couldn't really grasp where I was. It was just a nothingness. It was like the big nothing.
Yeah.
But it was crazy when I became awake, trying to explain to everybody what I was going through when I was under. And of course, they all dismissed it to drugs and all that other stuff. But I do remember, and I haven't talked about this part, which we spoke a little bit about in the beginning, before the show. I don't speak about this part because it really disturbs me. And I don't know if this was during a dream state while I was in ICU, or if it was part of my NDE that came later. It all kind of ran together because there's no concept of time. I remember some doctors or medics or somebody outside of a room talking about there's just been an accident, a baby's been injured, but we either have to save the baby or we save her. And I remember somebody saying, save her. And I remember me saying, save the baby.
Yeah.
But I got saved. And so I felt guilty when I woke up. I even asked my mom about the baby. I said, where's the baby? Is the baby okay? And they're like, what baby?
So that didn't
happen. And I said, the baby in the accident. And they were looking at me like, what is she talking about? I'm like, no, you don't understand. You all took, because they didn't have enough doctors or something. And that's a part of my ND I don't talk about. But after becoming a student of yours, I kind of figured out, that had a lot to do with what I was going through at the time. I had lost my faith. I was still a Christian, but had really turned my back on the church. I had a really bad breakup. I was taking unnecessary risks at work. I was in a specialized unit, and I was very unhappy. And so I think I had to work through a lot of that when I had that experience.
I know that feeling.
And I definitely think that had I not had this experience, that I may not be here today. I think something else may have happened. But yeah, so my negative near-death experience ended up being positive in life, because it took me a couple of years to catch up, but I found my church, I found my calling, and I came back and had a different view on a lot of different things. My spirituality came out. I have a deeper understanding of things of the world, and I don't take anything for granted, and I don't fear death anymore.
Jamie, I'm not going to butt in any further than this, but you're so authentic. And
well, I mean, that's what happened. It's what happened,
and it's so moving. And anyway,
it's refreshing, isn't it? We don't have too much authenticity today.
We love you. We just love you. That's it.
Well, I love you back, but it's just that was it. I mean, if you can take anything away from it, it's like everything. Just understand what's really important. It's not what you do or what you claim to be. It's love. It's who you love, what's important to you, who's important to you.
So Regan, in all these examples, all these different yours was interesting too, in the sense that you had some negative ones that sort of broke down and changed through the course of the different events and your influence. So it seems, from what I'm hearing with Jamie, with Kathy's, and yours as well, that we do elicit some kind of control over what happens here, in the sense that we can interact with the circumstances and they seem to produce various changes. And in your particular case, with the mask coming off, and I really liked what you talked about there, where you were fighting different aspects of, well, it reminded me of the story of Buddha in his quest for enlightenment, when Mara tempts him with all these different temptations, and he has to defeat each one. And of course, Mara is not into Buddhism quite the same as like Satan or the devil is to Christianity. Mara is perfectly understood to be a personification of our attachments, our indulgences, our everything that keeps us stuck from progressing. And it sounds like for you, Regan, and for you, Kathy, and for you, Jamie, it was a transformative experience, that these negative things occurred in a sense to sort of awaken something within you to take control and to move beyond them. Is that, Regan, in your mind, is that a fair assessment here?
I really think so. It was like that, and your mind goes, wow, I have kind of control over anything negative or evil. I have this power. I'll tell another, I don't think I told this on your show before, but anyway, we have a lot of new listeners. I'll try to make it quick. But when I was first getting into spirituality, I had a dream. And it was so powerful, I shook my wife awake when I woke up, and I wrote it down in a journal because it was so crazy. I was in a dream. I was in a plane crash, and I crashed on an island, and I was one of the few survivors. So we get out of the plane, all of a sudden there's this evil that's there that's going to devour us like some big monster. So what we started doing is running away from that monster, and we ran up a mountain until I came right to the edge of a cliff. There was nowhere to go, and this thing was going to, I was so scared this thing was going to devour me. And then so as I look over there, there's like a Pillsbury Doughboy. Yeah, I can't say that quick. It was coming up. It was coming up out of the clouds, and I knew I could jump to safety, but then something in me says, no, I'm going to turn around and face this, and then it was like someone put a pause button like on a recorder, and I woke up. But I woke up and I told my wife, I think I just passed some kind of test about facing my fears, so now fast forward to when I had my life between life experience, where I spent 3 hours in heaven, and I'm coming back and I'm looking down at the earth, and my guide is next to me. And all of a sudden, I find myself on that very same cliff at that very moment where I had to make the decision. Do I jump to safety or do I turn around and face it? And here comes the hand up. And my facilitator says, jump to safety. And I said, F no. F no. I'm going to turn around and face my fear. And I turned around, and 2 inches from my face was a man smiling at me. And he says, I love you. I forgive you. And he hugged me. And I looked behind him, and as far down as I could see the mountain, might have been 100, 200 people. They were all lined up there. And I stood on that cliff, and each one came up and said, I love you. I forgive you. And I'm entranced, but my eyes, I'm bawling like crazy because I'm thinking, what did I do to him? Oh, my God. And the last one, which is the one, and now I'm starting to feel like I want to cry, was a young girl. And she was about 9 or 10 years old, had straight brown hair down to her waist. And because in this process, you're aware that you're going through the session, but yet you're there seeing all this. It's like you split off. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, what did I do to her? And she just had these angelic eyes, and she says, I love you. I forgive you. And then boom, I was like back up in space. Well, that experience in my 3 hours was the one I remember the most, because I felt when I came back, and maybe Kathy's had this kind of experience too, something lifts off you. When you have these experiences, you feel lighter. Somehow you feel kinder in a way. You feel like your compassion goes to a different level. Yeah. I'll never forget that. And it's all about having power to face your fear, turn around and chop it up.
On a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being entirely dreamlike and 10 being absolutely as awake as you are right now, where would you rank these experiences, Regan?
Wow. I would say it bounced back. It would be like 10, I'm really there, I'm experiencing this because I'm crying, but the other part of me knew that I'm going through this experience and that everything's okay, and this is experience I'm having. But because I became vulnerable, I just allowed it to happen. Like now when I'm thinking of it, the emotion came back. So, yeah. I mean, like, really, does that happen with you, Kathy, too?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's real. And I'd give it a 12.
Yes. 12. Especially when you're in the heaven part and you're going, I don't want to go back. Come on, let me stay here.
Jamie, what would you give it?
I want to give it a number, but I was definitely happy to be back. It
felt real to you, though.
I can remember it. That's why I started choking up during it. I've never told anybody about the baby thing because it really kind of stained my psyche. But the more I talk about it, the more I do these kind of shows with these lovely people, I realized that I was tested too. I think one test was a test of my faith when I called out for St. Michael and Christ, and I decided to fight. And then one was I was willing to give up my life for a newborn baby's life.
Yes.
And so I think there's two tests right there. So yeah, it makes me feel better about it, but it's still very emotional for me. And yeah, I mean, they can attest to it too. When we talk about it, it's just like it happened to me 2012, and I can remember like it was a few hours ago.
Yeah. I mean, okay, when I do regular therapy for people, and most of my clients are women that have rape, incest, and violence done to them, when they become spiritual and they go through this process, they go to the other side and they come back, what they tell me is they go, I can still remember the experience, and I don't like thinking about it, but when they look at who they are now because of that experience and how strong they've become and how spiritual they've become and how, going through that bad experience in the physical in this life, not in the afterlife, I'm kind of equating that as similar to what we go through in the other worlds, that they go through a horrible thing. Like you had that bad accident. And look, if you hadn't had that bad accident, you may have not become a nun and be here right today because that changed you. So the experience of going through that and, everything you did was not good and you don't like to remember it, but you go, wow, thank you.
And I remember I remember having a conversation with my mother who when I first started going to church again and told her I was going to, become Catholic, she's like, well, I can say this, you definitely are a calmer person. You seem like you're more at peace. I said, yeah, because I've gotten answers that I've never been able to get, and I've experienced things that most people can't experience, and I don't let a lot of stuff bother me anymore. I used to have a hair trigger temper, but I don't let it bother me anymore, and I am very sensitive.
Yeah, what about Job in the Bible, right?
Right.
So, Kathy, when you think about it from Regan's standpoint there, referring to it as a test, I don't subscribe to a typical, I guess, a more conventional Catholic or even Christian model that God needs to test us. I mean, why would a being that knows everything need to test anyone? He already knows the outcome.
Testing ourselves.
So yes. Would you say that the test is for you, not for his benefit, but for your benefit, to perhaps teach you a little bit about how powerful you actually are, that you need this information, you need to go through this struggle in order to realize what you're capable of?
Well, I'm going to come from a different direction on that. I think after all these years, I'm of the opinion that I planned my life and I wanted to learn certain things. And so these tests I chose. And I think the best result of all of these is empathy. Things that happen to us here on earth, we can handle it in different ways. But having lost a child of my own, a baby, I was very empathetic to two of my friends that had lost babies after me. They'd say, I can talk to you, you know how I feel. And that's empathy. So all the quote negative things that have happened through my life, I've gained in empathy. And I mean, with all the crap that's happened, I got a lot of empathy, believe me.
I agree. Same thing. Yep.
And that's the good news. And the thing that came after this was I was told, everybody pretty much gets the voice when they come back. They can hear God more clearly. But I said, this was a bad trip, actually. I don't want to repeat this. What can I do other than thou shalt not? That didn't work for me. Give me something positive that I can do. And the answer came, Kathy, just be loving, kind, merciful, forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful.
Yeah.
And if you can't remember anything more, just be loving and kind. That's all you need to know.
That's the meaning of life.
Right.
There.
Mm. Yeah.
Yep.
That is a powerful statement.
Because my reflection is, and I've been caught up in this, so I'm kind of
you're feeling it.
Really emotional.
You got the feels.
And I'm not really.
It's okay. I should have got tissue.
But it's the obvious reflection is that the line in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others that trespass against us.
Right.
That all of the consistent thing in this is no matter whether it's by terror or by or the consolation, it's the realization that the divine love envelops us when we embrace that line. And so as much as we're wronged, we wrong lots of people, and the things that trap us are where we either are so proud that we don't think we need forgiveness from other people, or we're so twisted that by our people that have wronged us that we're caught in that, and therefore it's tense, and we're just trapped in our own anxiety and in our own self-loathing, and the only antidote is divine love, and it's that divine love that allows you to forgive yourself as well. Right. Because I'm with you. God does not put us in hell. We put ourselves in hell.
Yeah.
Well, that is actually
clinging on.
That is correct.
That's
Catholic theology.
Teaching, by the way.
That is Catholic teaching.
Yeah.
And whether or not the Catholics are teaching it is another question. But that is Catholic teaching.
Very well taught.
Yeah. The correct actual theology teaches that God doesn't send anyone to hell. You send yourself there, which is consistent with what we're hearing here tonight. And honestly, I can read between the lines with those negative NDEs from that medical study, that medical journal. It seems to be that these are people, several of them were suicides.
Yeah.
Clearly no one's killing themselves because they're happy. And so they're going to be taking some of that guilt and pain and suffering with them. So what are they going to see? What are they going to expect to see? And that is very also consistent with the nature of the Bardo in Buddhism, which I'd like to cover when we get back here. So let's go ahead and break right now. It's a good stopping point. We'll take our last break, and then when we come back, I'll talk about the Bardo. The discussion will continue, and if you've got a question or a comment, you can call into the show as well and talk to our guest tonight. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
pushing my limits and all the drive that I have. Well, I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread, well, I built a resistance with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you off the ground. You were gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you for days. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Take your time, not in the fast lane. I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to mend your wounds from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other and made our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. Such an interesting discussion tonight on negative near-death experiences, as well as focusing on the inherent truth to them. Perhaps we're more powerful than we think we are. I think we are. If you've got a question, comment, or story that you'd like to share with our panel tonight, you can call into the show. The number to call is 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to be placed into the queue. And also turn on your radio, okay, so that, or your television or phone or whatever you're watching it on, so that we don't hear the back echo. And we'll take you on the air. You can also, of course, leave questions or comments in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Such a fascinating topic tonight. Certainly one that strikes a lot of emotion, clearly. And I have some thoughts on Buddhism and the Gati, as well as the Bardo when we get back here in a moment. Then we'll start going into calls, okay? Don't go away. In Buddhism, there is something called death practice, actually, in Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana school. The more sophisticated, I think, more mystical form of Buddhism. The kind the Dalai Lama practices, if you're unfamiliar with the different schools and the different techniques. And what is interesting about this is that they have in their death practice various things that they can do, various rituals and types of meditation that can help facilitate what is essentially what we would call in the West a near-death experience. Only for the Buddhists, it's absolutely actual events happening. But they operate from the position that everything is an illusion of our attachments, a manifestation of our stream of consciousness, what they would refer to as the alaya, the stream of consciousness that comes into being and falls out of being, and will always manifest in one of the six gati. Okay, so the six gati are, and I'll start in the middle because that's where we are, is the human realm. Okay, so there's the human gati, which is the human experience that we all know very well right now. And then right below it is the animal gati, which is where the animals exist, but not quite at the same level or stream of consciousness that human beings enjoy. And then you start getting into the hell realms, where you have the hungry ghosts, and that is very, very consistent with sort of the modern paranormal concept of, unfinished business and trauma keeping people stuck on Earth, and where hauntings come from, and all of that kind of thing. And then the last hell realm, is hell. And in Buddhist thought, there's so much pain and suffering that you don't even really care about anything else because you're so consumed by the pain and suffering of hell. And the hungry ghosts are so consumed by never being satisfied, never being able to satisfy their attachments. And animals are beasts of burden for humans. We eat them, we work them, that there's no chance for enlightenment for these three gati. So you want to be in the human gati because the human gati is the only place where you can attain to enlightenment. There's two realms above the human gati, which are the heaven realms. There's the demigod realm, where there is kind of like, almost, I kind of liken it to like Harry Potter. It's like there's like human beings, but they have power. and they're fighting all the time because they're fighting for power, kind of like human beings with politics, only this is for like actual metaphysical power. And then they're too busy being all torn up in this struggle for power that they don't care about enlightenment. And then the highest realm, the heaven realm, they're so blissed out, they're so happy, they're so peaceful, they're so much in love, everyone loves each other, that no one wants to attain to enlightenment. So for the Buddhist, all of these manifestations will happen throughout a person's life. There are many people that, that end up in true hells that of their own making, or life is unkind to them and they end up in bad situations. Likewise, there's people that just seem to have the Midas touch, and luck falls their way, and they live these wonderful lives. They're always, they're healthy, they have lots of money, and again, not necessarily the healthiest thing spiritually, because they become consumed and attached to those realities. The person who's suffering gets attached to their suffering. The person who's blissed out with like lots of money and happiness is too absorbed and attached to that to really care. But in the center point, the human experience is where the progress is made. And so, therefore, the six gati, or the other five, I should say, are always trying to bring us back to this point. And that is how Buddhists understand the afterlife as well. Is that it's not just something that's happening in our actual physical life, but it's something that happens immediately after death. We enter what is known as the bardo, and this is a state in between enlightenment, or whether or not it's decided, is it going to be nirvana or samsara for you? Are you going to get stuck back on the wheel of karma, or are you going to transcend the karma? Either way, whether you experience hell, heaven, or the human reality, or come back as an animal, or, fighting it out with the demigods, or struggling as a wandering, hungry ghost, it's all illusion. And we can shape the illusion through controlling those streams of consciousness, which is why Buddhists focus so much on meditation. That's the focal point. And therefore, we can control what gati we end up in, even in the moment. Typically, though, it takes eons to get out of the heaven and hell realms. This is interesting because we don't really know what an eon is when you're not inside time, right? So what Kathy experienced, what Jamie experienced, and to a large extent what Regan experienced, could have been eons in a sense, but because they were able to use their skill, their spiritual sophistication, and I would say spiritual maturity, which is also largely emotional maturity as well, I think, it brings them out into this higher stage of fundamental awareness that perhaps these are truly, as the Buddhists say, manifestations of illusion that we must transcend in order to wake up to what's actual. And that's sort of ineffable, beyond our understanding, beyond our capacity to truly comprehend. But it's regardless, it's there, and something that is truly worth noting that we can talk about here. We also got a call coming in from the New Hampshire area code 603. I think this is Michael.
Should be Michael.
Michael, you're on the air.
Hi, I can hear you say my name, but it's so choppy.
Is it choppy? Okay, would you want to try calling back? Because you sound clear.
Yeah, let me try calling back. I'm going to see if I can call on Skype.
Okay, yeah, try Skype. Or do you still have the contact information for calling into the show? Like directly on... Yeah, just come on in visually. That will be easier.
All right, I can barely hear you. Let me see if I can follow that link. I think you said try calling on the link that Brandon gave me.
Yes, try going. Yes. If you can hear me, try that.
All right, okay, I'll try.
All right. We'll talk to you soon if you can hear me. Sometimes cell phones, they do their own thing. But she's going to come in. She's been a guest on the show before. This is Michael from the Indigo Child episode, as well as some of the other ones we've done on archetypes. And I think she's going to be a fantastic person to also kind of chime in on this discussion. She's been a student of mine for many, many, many years. I've known her since she was a child, and truly a very spiritually sophisticated woman. I really appreciate all of her insight. So she's going to be here shortly. But I guess while we wait, Regan, Kathy, whoever would like to go first, what do you think? I don't know how much you all know of Vajrayana Buddhism, but based on my description of the Gati and the Bardo, do you think that makes sense compared to what you've experienced?
Don't write anything off.
You're not writing anything off.
Anything's possible. Anything's possible.
Yeah. Regan, what do you think?
Same thing. I think what you're describing is somehow intertwined with what both Kathy and I experienced. We have different terminologies, and sometimes we're concentrating maybe on one level and not the others. But I believe that the way they explain that, that if we dig deep into what Kathy and I are experiencing, or what Jamie experienced there, that it's, we were fooling around with one of those steps. We were somewhere.
Yes.
It's just the fact that, and this is what's so beautiful about your show, is you're just showing people or trying to educate them that, hey, there's a lot more than this one level that you've been taught.
Oh, yeah.
There's
so much more.
Whatever you want to call it. Yeah, there's, like purgatory could be maybe one of those levels in Buddhism.
That is actually true.
We just call it something else. One thing that I did realize, though, when they say we choose our own hell or own whatever, in the research we've been doing, when a lot of people are standing before the council and they realize that they've done a lot of awful things, the council says, what do you want to do about it? And then it's up to the soul there to say, oh gosh, like I was talking, I think last time, some souls say, I got to go to timeout, which I call purgatory or something. I got to go down there. I got to retool. I got to think things out and then come back and try again. And others say, maybe I need to go down and experience, for me to learn and experience what I caused other people to feel. And I need to go back down and do it. But souls, ultimately, as we're finding in the research, they choose, but, they choose how to correct their mistakes.
All right. This is Michael trying to get in. Hopefully. It sounds like, Michael, you're there?
Sounds like she's in a pool.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. We can't see you yet, but we can hear you.
Oh, I'm on my bed. Hold on. Do you want me to start the video? Or?
Well, you don't have to if you're not.
If you're in your jammies in the bed, maybe not.
No, we can do it with.
Ready for bed.
We can do it with audio.
We'll
That's
give you
fine.
some dignity.
Yeah, she's got to go to work early. So
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. So, go ahead. Whatever you were going to say on the phone, let's hear it, because I know that there's so much that you can contribute to that. I hope you heard me talk about the Bardo and the Gati. I don't know if you heard that part, but
I did. Yeah, I did, and I think you and I have talked about that. One-on-one.
Yes.
Did I share my near-death experience?
I don't think so. Not with this audience. I don't believe
I've
so.
not heard it.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much time in case there's any other callers, but I in college I went through a very, very dark time. I started experimenting with mushrooms, and that's a whole other thing I could go off on my trips, and they're very, very similar, a lot of them, to these near-death experiences.
Yes.
But my particular near-death experience was I had slowly, over the course of like 2 or 3 days, I had too much sugar. I wasn't taking care of my diabetes. And I had consumed an edible, a weed edible. And that was like a few hours before it started happening, probably about like 5 hours. And so I started to, I mistook soda that was supposed to be diet. I switched sodas, so I accidentally drank a whole 2 liter of like sugar soda.
Oh my God.
And so I started entering into diabetic ketoacidosis.
Yeah, DKA. Yeah.
Which basically means my blood was acidic, and I started, my organs started to shut down, and so to make a long story, there's a lot to this story, but I ran outside. I was with a person at the time who was trying to get me to the hospital, but this is when it started started getting, so I was awake, and I got it in bits and pieces after, but I started to, like, the line between reality, well, conventional reality and the other, what lies on the other side, started to become blurry. and I entered into a ditch and laid down. And this big blue light engulfed me, and almost like that telepathic feeling that she was talking about earlier, where I basically like beamed into my soul and my being that I'm not to die and not here, not right now, and gave my body like animated my body, and I got back up, and so I was like imbued with the will to live, to keep fighting. And so, long story short, I walked up to there was a patrol officer, and they thought that I was on they thought that I was on a I think they said heroin.
And hallucinogen.
Yeah.
I was trying to communicate that I'm diabetic. I didn't have my medical alert bracelet on because I had ripped it off at one point, and
Oh my God.
so luckily my boyfriend at the time ran out with my test kit, and he's like, she is type 1 diabetes, she needs to go to the hospital. And the cops where I was, and the college campus cops were very I'd say they were pretty incompetent as far as being cops goes, and they were like convinced that I was on these hard drugs, and they really wanted to take me to the station, but luckily they didn't. And it was at that point where I was in and out of consciousness, where I started to notice that people were animated with these different entities, and I didn't have the vocabulary at the time, but I guess like archetypal entities. And as I was going through this, it was basically a series of events very similar to what was said earlier. But I would encounter each entity, and the person at that time in that moment was that entity. It was that archetype. And there were a lot of people who like the cops, and some of the cops were, I could see almost like an aura, like they were really nasty, really like corrupt, nasty, like rotting. Their flesh was rotting off, and I could see that certain people just radiated light and love and beauty, and it's very similar to what we were talking about. And I could see that one of the cops radiated this love energy, and so I didn't speak to any of the other cops. I spoke to him, and then he was the one that convinced them to take me. And then I went, I was in and out of consciousness, and then the next memory I had, I was strapped onto the gurney, and there was the EMTs, and they were both just like beautiful angelic creatures, and I slipped back into nothingness, and then I came back out, and there was all these nurses running around, and I remember one of the nurses was just the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And I remember I was peeing myself, because when you're in ketoacidosis, you're constantly peeing.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were replenishing my fluids, and
Right.
and I looked at the nurse, and I looked at her, I said, I am so sorry, because I was peeing everywhere. I was
Right.
peeing. And she looked at me and she said, sweetie, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you. And then I was out, and I entered the void. And I was in a 12-hour coma, and I came back. When I came back, I remember looking at the clock, and my mother and my brother were there at my side, and I remember looking at the clock, and the concept of time, it was like, I knew that it was a clock, that there was clockness about it, but I couldn't read the damn thing. I couldn't read any of the numbers. I couldn't read it. It was just like the clockness was there. Like the archetype of the clock was there.
So you're seeing things in really like symbolic notation almost.
Yes. Yeah. And I do remember the last thing that I felt, and when I woke up, was just this feeling of immense love, beyond even when we use the term love, just beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up and I'm like, I'm alive. I thought to myself, I'm back.
Yeah.
Kathy, what are your thoughts on that? How she described that?
I can't help you.
Regan, do you have any thoughts on that one? Oh, Regan. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. We got you muted somehow. There we go.
I just like Kathy. I mean, it was her own personal experience, but it was otherworldly.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, she was breaking the barrier. I think she was kind of slipping to the other side, kind of coming back, slipping the others, kind of back and forth that way. But let me ask her, so you having had that experience now, how did it change you in any way for the better? Or did it change you in any way for the better? Did you see life differently? To Michael.
Michael, you there still? Oh, we lost Michael. Michael got muted too. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Okay,
there we go.
That's a good question. I was having a very difficult time before that. I was struggling a lot and questioning what my spirituality. And after that, I remember thinking, I just remember thinking that I want to give what I felt to other people, that love and that feeling of just unconditional love and warmth and safety. And I remember thinking I have to figure out how I can embody that and give it to people while they're still alive. And it kind of began my journey. I reconnected with Brian, with Bishop, and that's around the time I contacted you.
And you got yourself baptized. I mean, that's something, right?
Yeah, a little bit after that, yeah. So, and there was this feeling coming back from that I was, I don't sound arrogant, but so I was meant for greater than what I was on the path. What I had put myself on the path to become, that all was just this illusion that washed away. I dropped out of college about a year after that. I was studying zoology. And I sort of had this epiphany that I needed to spread that feeling with my art. That's one way I could do it. And then I sort of started entering the care field and direct support. And there's so many ways you can choose to help others. And I just knew that basically one path was dissolved in front of me and another path was opened, basically, is how I can describe it.
Well, there you go, Regan. It sounds though it was transformative, and it seems like these experiences continue to be so for everyone that goes through them.
And Kathy, look what you're doing now compared to before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I can't even give you a list at this point, but yeah, I love I read this the other day. It says, usefulness is the greatest joy of life. And I'm learning that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yep, all of us.
We've got
Regan. You said something earlier. One of the first things you said. It's always good to see you, Regan. By the way.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, Chris. I'm so glad you're here.
You guys haven't had your little chat yet. That's true. It hasn't happened yet.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Chris, wait a second. Wait a second. When you weren't on one of the shows before, when I got off the show, I cried for 2 weeks. Because I missed you.
I cried because I missed that episode. Anyway,
you're such a joy.
There's a deep connection there, but
I'm crying whether he's here or not. So
he cries when I am here.
Emotional people.
I cry when you are here. That's right.
You're the freak, Regan. Most people cry when I am around. But you mentioned about one of the first things you answered about. Because you're guiding people through things, they're far less likely to have a negative experience. and yes, because you're guiding them, but also because they're already prepared for that kind of, like, they're already thinking in that direction, right? They're already in that what the what Catholic spirituality would call the examen, right? They're already in that zone, and so now I was just going to reflect that I've been with a lot of people when they're dying, both when I was a policeman and obviously in the priesthood, and my experience matches that of researchers that say that basically people on their deathbed are most peaceful if they're either they've developed a religion, a spirituality, a way of life, or they've also, conversely, if they've explored all of that but they're affirmed atheists on their deathbed, those people are actually most at peace. It's the ones, which is the vast majority of people, it's the ones in the middle that only when they're now confronting death, they go, "Oh my God," they've not processed or thought about or prepared themselves in any way for that encounter, and they are distressed people. Now, yes. I mean, obviously, if fortunately I'm around them, at least I can say, you need to know God loves you. I mean, because I know that's true. So whatever the circumstances of their life, whatever condition they're in, whatever their moral disposition, I know that God loves them. And so I just wondered whether, you had any reflection on that, whether you see that connection between and Kathy, the sorts of people that end up talking to you, Kathy, because they've had this terrible experience. Is it overwhelmingly people who've not been very well prepared for that? And conversely, Regan, with you, do you find that it is that sense of the examen that helps them get there?
Yeah, in other books that I've read, that's what I hear happens is that, people that don't really have a good spiritual base, in a sense, as they get close to death, that's when all their fears that they buried for like ever, and now they're right on the precipice of going over, and all their fears, they go, in a sense, they go kind of kicking and screaming, and other people that seem just like you say. I've heard so many stories. I just did a session for a woman who teaches doulas, of people to be there.
Oh, that's a wonderful profession. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I could do it. I would have to, man. So yeah, and bless you, Chris, for being there for people, because I think just you have a beautifulness about you that I can just picture would soothe anybody. I mean, it's just great that you can do that for people. So yeah, I think if people aren't prepared, if they haven't done their work down here, they're pretty scared, and I think that's what keeps some people from crossing over to where the bishop here has to help them, because once they get to the other side, they're all like spinning around because they're stuck with their beliefs that they had, and they just I think
that is, I could not agree with you more than that. I think in my experience, that's exactly what it is. Apathy. And it's not just about, falling away from the church. I know many people that fell away from the church and found themselves in another religion and are just fine spiritually, and they're doing quite well. It's about just being apathetic in general, not caring, and then it gets too late. And then when they finally do have to face death, they're not prepared for it, and that does not bode well. I've never seen that bode well, which is why people always ask me, what about suicides? It's like, suicide's not like a automatic ticket to hell, but it's not going to bode well because they're taking so much anger and resentment with them that, that's not the way you want to approach death, because it seems to me, at least, and I subscribe to the Buddhist model, that the bardo is very malleable. It's like a reflection, a mirror for your soul, and whatever you're cultivating is sort of what comes out of it, and that we cultivate quite terrifying things as human beings. I mean, we do all sorts of atrocities as a civilization. So that's all fair game when you're approaching this. So it does, I think, the state of mind does matter. Now, we've got some questions here in the chat that I want to get to. And the first one I'm seeing right now is from Holly, where she asked, and I want both Regan and Kathy. Yeah. She's got a few of them that are good. Regan and Kathy, I'd like you both to answer. Let's start with Regan on this one. Do you think God directs these experiences to change us?
I'm sorry, what's that again?
Do you think God directs these experiences? So these near-death experiences that people are having that are transformative, as Michael described, as everyone here has described to some degree. Do you think that it's God that's directing these experiences to change us?
Well, I do. And like Kathy mentioned, I think in her experience and mine, when I have people on the other side, when they've had difficult lives, and all of a sudden they realize that they chose these roadblocks and they chose these difficult things to go through. So in a sense, as souls, we choose a lot of the difficulty we want to go through, but ultimately it's our higher selves or God that's wanting us to go through things, to learn things that way. Wasn't that something like you said, Kathy, earlier about that?
I think we do choose things. I don't think God gets involved personally. God gave us free will. And I think that when we get back, you get your life review. And from all the hundreds of people I've heard, it's not a bad thing. It's just a reflection. You get to see how you did on what you planned. And one part you see your life from beginning to end, but then they flip it around and you get to experience how it was to interact with you. So if you were kind to somebody, you get to feel that kindness. If you were bad or nasty or Hitler or somebody, you get to feel all that pain that you caused other people. That's not a judgment. That's just karma. You get, that's what you wanted to learn by those lessons. You get to learn it. And I don't think God has anything to do with it personally.
Yeah. And a good example I had a young woman come to me, and when she, in her life between life process, she wanted to be able to see her father who had passed on. And she always was trying to please her father her whole life. And he was like a militaristic kind of dad. Like he never held her. He never told her he loved her, but he was always there. Yeah. He was always there supporting the family, but she'd come home with a B- or a B, and he'd be so angry with her that she didn't get an A. So she never was able to please him, and then he died. So long story short, she gets to the other side. There he is, and I'll never forget the look on her face because she's in trance. And I say, "Do you see him?" And she goes, "Yes, there's my father." And I said, "What's wrong?" And she goes, "He's smiling at me." She had never felt her father ever smile at her. So I said, "Go have a conversation with him. When you're done, let me know what you talked about." And she said, when she says after a while, says, "Okay, I guess we're done talking." I said, "What did you talk about?" And she says, "My dad says, daughter, you don't know how hard it was for me to play that role of being that militaristic dad for you, because what you don't remember is you wanted me to be that way in your life because you had gotten so codependent on so many times. You never learned to be a strong person, and you never learned how to set boundaries in that." And he says, "I was being that way because it was forcing you to change, to have to be strong and all that." And then she realized, we talked about it after, she says, "Gosh, I've become that woman. I'm strong. I boom, and now she has, when she thinks of her dad now, she thinks of that smiling dad, and that he played that role in her life to teach her, and she did." So,
Brandon, what's our next question?
We actually had one from Facebook when we started. Comes from Amanda.
Yep.
She asked, "Do you believe in near-death experience that the person was sent back to help others with attainment with demons? But also, when I was rebaptized, I was in cold water and I gasped for air. And when that happened, I seen Jesus and he told me something, but I'm still don't understand why me."
So
Did that question make any sense?
I'm not sure about the rest of it. What was the first part of that question again? Just so I make sure that we're clear.
Okay, yeah. So just the first part is, do you believe in near-death experience that the person was sent back to help with others with attainment with demons?
I don't know what they mean by attainment with demons, but Kathy, do you think that you got sent back because you still had work to do? I think that's what they're getting at.
That's what I'm getting from it.
I do. They told me flat out, "You've got too much left to do." And that the other part of that is, when I was there, I saw this table with this big book on it when it was open halfway. And my friend had been showing me something in the book, but they do the mind wipe thing when you come back. So I think that was, my life was about half over, and they were explaining that I had to do this stuff. This is just my supposition. And I signed up for this stuff, so you got to go back. and get it done. And boy, every day I'm thinking, when somebody says, wow, I don't know if I never met you, I never would have known this. And thank you. I'm so glad I met you. And I think, got one more off the list.
Regan, what are your thoughts on that one? Yeah, I'm assuming you agree.
Kathy's, yeah. Even though I didn't have the near-death experience, in her same way,
right.
When I went through this life between lives process and was on the other side, I was able to see the point. They asked me point blank, do you want to do this work? And when I said yes, I said the F word again. I'm sorry. I said, yeah, yes. And I felt that was so much power in me and it excited me so much. So when I came back, I really realized that, I chose to do this work. And this is like, I'm excited because now I can get really my mission going, right, Kathy?
Right.
It's like,
you find your purpose. You find your purpose.
Now,
that's key.
Here's what my guide said. It was next to me. So I was looking down, I was seeing the earth. And he says, okay, as I started getting a little closer to the earth, I started feeling emotional pain. It was horrible. And my guide stopped me and he says, look, now that you've decided to do this work, as we get closer to earth, you're beginning to feel the pain of the earth. And I happened to think at that moment, at that very second, how many people in that world down there are going through horrible, awful experiences and pain and emotional and death and everything. So my guide says, look, he says, there's 4 things I want you to do, or your physical body won't be able to handle the energy that you have to use for this work. And he says, you'll die. And I says, okay, let's stop for a minute. Let's talk about this for a minute. So he says, every time when you wake up in the morning, create yourself as a vehicle for spirit. And I heard the prayer, bless this day and those I serve, as I keep 1 foot in heaven and 1 foot planted firmly on earth to accomplish my mission at any cost. Okay. Then he says, second thing you do as many random acts of kindness as you can. And I saw myself outside a 7-Eleven store picking up a piece of trash that someone dropped. Okay. The third thing he says, spend more time in nature. He said that's God's gift to us all to kind of filter out all this negativity to keep us balanced. And the fourth thing was practical. He said, talk to other therapists about how they ground themselves. And I've just been warned 4 times in the last 2 months, through 2 times through my clients and 2 other things where they said, slow down. They tell me, slow down, Regan, and one of my clients was in trance. She says, Regan, my guide wants to talk to you. And I said, okay, that was spooky because now I feel the guide talking directly through my client to me. And he says, Regan, ground yourself. He says, you're not grounding yourself properly and you're going to get sick. And so I went, okay, yep, so anyway.
I do. I mean, I think Carl Jung would love this show. And I'm more convinced than ever that Jung is right when about his description of the collective unconscious is a description of the things that we're tapping into that are just universal and are part of the human condition that and when you talked about confronting things in these experiences, they're nearly all they are all Jungian archetypes, right?
Yeah.
And so now that's not to say this is merely a psychological experience. That's not what I think. Jung is far more profound than that. I think this is like the nature of being itself that we're wrestling with. But I think I kind of revisited Jung a few months ago and having not read him for 20 years, and it seems that the older I get and the more experiences I have with people and with my own sense of reflection, the more I think it's true. Super true.
It is. It's a great model. And I would say that, what feels to us to be dreamlike or illusion is actually more authentic than what we have typically associated with being the real world. I don't think the real world is real at all. I think that's the malleable part.
I think it's less real.
It's much less real. And I think if you really pick apart the core of every religion, you would arrive at that, at least in the mystical sense. So like mystical Christianity would agree with this. Mm-hmm. Clearly Buddhism and Hinduism would. Shinto as well to a degree. Maybe Islam would have the most difficulty with it because it's a very literal religion. But outside of that, I think there's The Sufis, though, they'd get it. The Sufis would get it. All right, we got another question. This one is from one of our moderators. This is Val, who's Moosh on the chat. She says her husband just mentioned that he thought when a person is under surgery anesthesia that the experience is close to near death. And so, I guess it's kind of a medical question, but do either you or Kathy, Regan, Kathy, any comment on that? Any thoughts on that?
I was told with what they gave me, my brain was offline and I couldn't remember anything.
So you were brain dead, like you were.
Well, it was just a coma.
A coma. Okay, coma. Okay, gotcha.
And then they said, you won't be able to remember a thing. It was some sort of an amnesiac.
Okay.
But I didn't remember a darn thing of all the terrible things they did to my body for 3 weeks, trying to keep me alive. But the NDE is just as, like you say, fresh as it happened yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Regan, in any of your research, have you found that there's a correlation there or no?
I think that the veil between the other side can be pierced in a number of ways. Some people actually pierce the veil when they're on mushrooms, or
as we saw.
I had a lot of clients that come to me that have had done ayahuasca, gone to ayahuasca ceremonies, or DMT, the DMT. And what these things do for people to have those experiences is they break the veil. Sometimes it's just for a few seconds, but it's so powerful that when they come out of that experience, they go, God, there is something more than this, and it gets them on a quest, to try to find that, or they want to take more drugs because they want to try to get back there again. In that. And that's,
do you think it's good to use substances to achieve these experiences, or do you think it's better to try to cultivate it naturally?
Well, I've asked one of my clients recently who's done it, who came to me because of some experience he had when he was on mushrooms a number of times. And then he heard about Michael Newton's book, Journey of Soul, and read some near-death experiences, like Kathy's gone through. Mm-hmm. And then when he says, oh, there's a way to do this without drugs and everything, and you can spend 2 hours there, and it's done in a scientific way. And he came. So I said to him over there, ask him if it was okay for to use the mushrooms and everything. And they said, it's up to each individual. He says maybe some person needs that to kind of have a wake-up call. Yeah. But they wouldn't say, yeah, everybody should use them and all that. They said so much of the stuff. Do you find that out too, Kathy? It's like a lot of the stuff. It's like each individual's different in a way. So yeah. I was on the other side. I went a second time to the other side now, and it was all to ask questions about COVID and the vaccines. 28 of us therapists, we swapped sessions, and then we did a whole. Everybody wrote what happened, and then we did a whole PowerPoint thing, and we all pretty much found the same thing. We're on the other side. COVID was like no big deal. Everybody that died, they're back home. They're perfectly fine, so don't worry about them. Yeah. But what they did say was sometimes God, or whatever we want to call God, uses the darkness to bring people to the light.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. That's what happened in certain ways. And look what happened to Jamie. It's sometimes it uses the dark to bring people to the light.
I've had 2 general anesthetics in my life, neither for life-threatening things, for very perfunctory kind of procedures. Yeah. And both times I've come round, I was a very young child with the first one. I was a kind of, 14, 15-year-old with the second. Both times I came round, people could say, well, it's the effects of the drugs, whatever it may be. But I remember, like the second time, because I was older, I can remember it really specifically. I went around the waiting room where other people were, and there were younger children there as well. And I said, don't worry about it. Like I was absolutely overwhelmed with a sense of love for people on both occasions. But the second time when I came around, I was like, I knew I had to communicate to, because these are little kids who were anxious probably about having, but I just had an overwhelming sense of that. And now I don't know whether that's connected, but I've not even thought about that until this question about anesthetics came up.
Well, I'll say Demerol is a wonderful drug. So it's possible.
I've got no idea. Yeah, it's possible.
What's I know that Holly had another good question. Do you have that, Jamie?
I did.
Brandon, do you happen to see it?
I'm gonna try and find it real quick.
And Jamie answered it. She said, do you think unresolved issues or guilt dictate the type of NDE?
Right. We did talk about that.
Kathy, what do you think on that?
No. Other than, I mean, I just that your beliefs more than I think can.
Maybe guilt associated with your religious beliefs.
No, what you're taught, what you believe.
Yeah.
I don't think guilt has anything to do with it personally.
Regan?
Yeah, no, I agree with Kathy, because I think initially when I was trying to become a spiritual person when I went to college, I went to Jesuit high school even, all the way through. And so when I get to college and I'm hearing about Buddhism, I went, what the heck is that? So I took a comparative religion course. And I remember when they got to the part where they said in India, they don't kill the cows because that could be their grandfather or something. And the whole class started laughing like a comedy club, But something in me went, okay, maybe there's something here still, So something woke up in me a little bit, and I started studying,
The Giants are really amazing. I mean, the Giants, when they will go around with these brooms everywhere.
Yes, not to step on a bug.
And they'll sweep the floor in front of them to get the bugs out of the way because they don't want to kill anything. And if they step on a bug, it could be a grandmother. You never know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, even though I still, I take spiders and I take them outside now. And then someone told me the other day, don't take house spiders outside because they don't know how and they're going to die outside. It's like, well, what do I do now? I got to have a separate room in the house. I put them in.
I sometimes put them in the garage.
Spiders are a bit more of a risk in this country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, they're not too safe over here either, Father. I mean, Georgia's got a lot of poisonous crap out this way. And we've got brown recluse and we've got black widows prolifically. You don't want to get bit by either one. I mean, I'm not going to say they're going to kill you, but they'll leave a nasty bite, and it could affect someone that's allergic, I think.
I feel sorry for for completely spiders that won't hurt you or do anything at all, and how many of them die because they have, people hate the black widows and the brown recluses, and these poor little spiders get squashed because they don't do anything, So.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Just as we thought about it, one just appeared on the outside of my window.
There you go.
He's listening to you, Father. He's like, what are you going to do?
Well, he's on the outside, so he can stay there.
He can stay out that way. He's outside now. He's waiting. What's our next question if we have one? Brandon, do you see any others? Or Jamie?
April had one way back. Did you catch that one, Brandon?
Oh, that was way back.
Yeah, I wrote it down, but it's way up the thread. I will say
while he's doing that, I'll tell you what they said about the vaccines.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Don't get us banned.
They said personal choice.
Yeah.
Personal choice. They said if you think it'll help you, it might. But if you don't want to, okay.
I mean, that's kind of a no shit answer. Yeah. I mean,
They popped our balloon,
Yeah.
I kind of feel that that's true about most things. I really do. One of my favorite stories about George Burns was that, he was kind of a prolific cigar smoker. I mean, a lot of it was shtick, but he did smoke them. He didn't inhale though. But he would have I think something like 15 a day of Churchill. So that's pretty much smoking the entire time you're awake. Because it takes about an hour and a half to get, an hour to get through a Churchill. So, you're pretty much doing it all day long if you're just smoking 15. But he had this wonderful joke where I guess he was in his 90s or something, and he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, and he always had his wits about him, which is really brilliant about George Burns. The interviewer said, isn't your doctor concerned about your cigar smoking at this advanced age? And he says, if I didn't smoke these cigars, I wouldn't have lived to attend his funeral. So the idea was, and there's some truth to that, it wasn't just a joke. I think if something makes you happy and it brings peace in your life, even if it's something that's traditionally considered to be toxic or bad for you, assuming you're not, being excessive in any particular way, although some people might think 15 cigars is acceptable. The man did live to almost 100, so maybe there's something to it, right? That maybe our mind.
Churchill lived a long time as well, and he drank a lot of alcohol and smoked about 12
a
cigars
lot.
a day. So.
Yes.
And stress?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think stress will kill you much faster than any cigar or anything, really. So I think there's some truth to how we look at our life. Father, what are your thoughts on, from a Christian vantage point? Because I know that there's probably Christians in the audience right now, Catholics in the audience, that are really struggling with some of these realizations, perhaps because some of it might, as Kathy and Regan, both being former Roman Catholics. So I mean, you grew up Roman Catholic. You grew up Roman Catholic during a rough time to be Roman Catholic. Let's face it. I mean, it was rough. The nuns were rough. They
And in America.
Yeah, in America, it was pretty bad. And I think that's honestly why so many baby boomers today do not go to church anymore, because they had such bad, horrible experiences growing up in the faith, which is really terrible. Hopefully we're repairing some of that damage now, but I don't know if the Roman Catholic Church is doing much for it here in this country. It doesn't seem so to me anyway. But Father, what would you say as far as like approaching this understanding that when we die, there's love, when people and maybe not even the Catholics. See, I think today, and Brandon, maybe you need to chime in on this one. I think today it's not the Catholic Church that's really the issue. It's these Protestant churches that are teaching the hellfire and brimstone that, Brandon, you grew up with. So maybe, Brandon, why don't you maybe talk a little bit about what you experienced there, and if that has maybe tainted some of your, or created fear about the afterlife. Has it?
So I talked about this when April was on during the religious trauma. And what I grew up being taught, I was a child, I couldn't have been more than 10, that I feared that if I went to bed without praying for forgiveness, and if I were to die, that I would wake up in hell.
What a terrible way to approach one's relationship to God. But please go ahead.
Great thing to tell a 10-year-old.
I mean, my goodness.
I don't even think I was 10. I know I was a child. And to be honest, I had asked my brother, like, did you have that same fear? And he said, yes. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other fears we had, like the rapture and whatnot. But I would
don't miss the rapture.
Yeah, God. That's just garbage.
Yeah.
But
I remember how many hours I spent trying to figure out, and what was venial and what was mortal. Because I get away with the venial ones, but I can't deal with those mortal ones.
Yeah.
But, I'm just saying that just because I'm so glad I was Catholic growing up when I look back now and what it taught me and everything. And I can see now that I'm looking back with a bigger thing, I can see how, like with what you're doing with it, it's wonderful. You're teaching people all kinds of stuff. You're just trying to get rid of the man-made
obstacles.
I actually think it's more fundamental than that. Look, I think that, so in answering the question, how do I confront people by saying it's all about love, is, you see, human beings, we have this tendency, this is what generates questions, right? We want the blueprint. We want the blueprint for how to do everything, okay? I remember when I was at the police academy, right? What if questions got banned? It happens in every course. I'm sure Jamie can relate, because there's always a what if, because they give you a definition of a crime, but what if this and what if that, and I remember, I'll be blunt about it, the staff officer said, what if your auntie had balls, she'd be your uncle? And that was the end of it. In other words, no more what if questions, right? and then when he was being more helpful, he said, look, what you're after is a blueprint of exactly what to do in every circumstance at all times. And we can't teach you that because life doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you got to be adaptable.
So what happens is, the church is an organic it's an organization, right? It develops and grows and lives and breathes. And so But what happens is people who feel bad or that they're caught in their own lives say to want an official blueprint from the church. How do I get back to this from that? It's not a bad thing that the church says, well, if you're not sure what to do, go to, be baptized, go to confession. All of these things are true. They work, but they're not a replacement for, they're only a pathway in which you can reach a point of forgiving other people and forgiving yourself so that you can immerse yourself again in the divine love that's always been around you. It's you that's put the shield up to keep it out. And so that's what I say. I say, people get, purgatory but these things, they're merely, when people have asked for a blueprint, the church has answered with but we shouldn't get caught into that, because in fact, the love of God is beyond any human architecture. It's beyond any explanation. But you see, there's a tyranny in the other direction. If you just say, it's all about divine love, well, people still have that desire for how do I do it? And so the problem is when we get too polarized on either extreme. And the true answer is to say, look, God's love is available to you. And you're the only one keeping it out. As Jesus said, the door is open. The lock's on your side. Yeah. So
that's right.
And that's the truth. And so I don't want to reject. I don't reject. I offer what the church offers as means by which people can, be assured of grace, forgiveness, the divine love. But the church is only offering a means for that. We don't control it or own it. God does.
Yeah.
Well said. Okay, Regan and Kathy, 30 seconds each to kind of just tell the audience how they can find you. Anything you want to tell them.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Kathy, go ahead. Oh, we lost her mute. Okay, yeah, there we go.
She's on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there you go.
Yeah.
There we go.
I'll just reiterate: be loving, kind, merciful, forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful.
I love it.
Great. I love that. Okay.
Regan?
You can reach me at visittheafterlife.com. It's an all new website. Lots of videos on there. Visittheafterlife.com. And anybody has any questions, they can always get a hold of me. So just like Kathy said, just be kind. Be kind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate it. And
It was great.
Nice meeting you.
We'd love to have you back on, both of you again.
Always good to see both of
separately,
you.
maybe next time, just so we can spend more time with each one of you. But thank you for coming on this panel for this special show and this topic.
Both, all of you, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
And I want to just thank all of you for joining us tonight. Jamie, thank you. Father Chris, Brandon, thank you again. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure what the show is. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Vestiges After Dark at 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. I guess that's pretty much it. What a
Sounds
fantastic show.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.
Be kind.